Chapter 48. NT. I don't like making excuses, but it seems I must tell you guys. I have my exams till Friday, so I cannot release many chapters tomorrow as well. Since I am already lagging behind on the schedule, so my only option left is grand release of 4 chapters every day till I catch up with the schedule. Chapter 48. Core Disciples Competition begins. Yuan School Main Sect allowed entry to the Masters of Hotian 7th stage or above. However, in accordance with the standards of Yuan School, only Hotian 9th stage disciples could enter the outer sect and only Xiantian level disciples could enter the inner sect. As for the disciples with the cultivation below Hotian 9th stage, they were treated as part-time disciples. They were basically like the slave disciples, and their status was very low in the Yuan School. Although the position of outer sect disciples was also relatively low within the Yuan School, however, they just needed to do a series of chores, and for that, they could receive some resources for cultivation. They would also get an opportunity to attend lectures about cultivation and techniques. In Qifeng Mountains Yuan School, most disciples would choose to work under the Yuan School after they had broken through the Hotian 9th stage. Well, no one was stupid enough to leave their own domain where they had lived and cultivated for all this time. Come with me, I'll introduce you to the several fellow top disciples, Yifeng said. Yifeng wanted Yishuan to make contacts with the top players among the core disciples, because, at his current strength and fame, Yishuan could be ranked among the top core disciples. This term's core disciples only had 3 top disciples who were widely renowned in the Yuan School. They were Zhang Yang, Qian Wanru, and Wu Hao. The strongest among them was Zhang Yang, with his strength similar to Yifeng, who was also a master of peak Hotian 9th stage. He was a tall and steady-looking young man. Qian Wanru was a beautiful woman with a colorful flower-like appearance, although her cultivation was only at the late Hotian 9th stage. Wu Hao was a tall, slim young man. His cultivation was the same as Qian Wanru, the late Hotian 9th stage. Including Yifeng, there were only 4 top core disciples in the Yuan School. Other core disciples were not strong enough to be considered among the top. However, the Zhang family already had 5 famous disciples, and in addition to that, this year, 2 more disciples had also reached the late Hotian 9th stage and had entered into the ranks of top disciples. For the core disciples competition, Zhang family had an overwhelming numerical advantage. And thanks to this, Zhang family was planning to snatch all of the blood yuan fruits for themselves by overwhelming the Yuan School. However, Yuan School, including Yishuan, had only 5, which was far from enough. The good thing about being a top core disciple was that one could enjoy many resources provided by the school. Now Yishuan had also joined this small group of geniuses, and all of them carried the hopes of Yuan School. Yuan School was planning to rely on this small group to beat the Zhang family geniuses in the upcoming competition at the Blood Yuan territory. Day after day, time passed by. In this duration, Yishuan also got used to his new status of one of the top core disciples, and finally, the day of the beginning of core disciples competition had arrived. On this day, the core disciples had been called to the top of the square. This was a broad plaza, and in comparison to its huge size, a group of mere 100 core disciples looked too small and insignificant. Yishuan and others did not have to wait for too long, and soon, 2 elders appeared in front of them. One of these elders was fat, and the other was thin. When the core disciples saw the 2 of them, they immediately knew who they were. Yishuan also knew that they were the well-known fat and thin elders of Yuan School. Because the fat and thin attributes of these 2 elders were too obvious, and in addition to that, these 2 had always accompanied each other from the time they had become the elders of this school. In fact, over time, many people had even forgotten their real names, and would directly call them fat and thin elders. This time's squad for the core disciples competition is again a lineup of losers, the fat elder said in a straightforward manner. I won't talk about the rest of the crap. Let's come to the point. The fat elder's face looked serious, and he said in a cold voice, The place where the competition is going to take place is called Blood Yuan territory. I think you already know where it is located. Countless people from our Yuan school have died there. I just hope that many of you will come back alive, so I asked again, whoever wants to quit, quit now. After hearing the words of Fat Elder, more than 40 core disciples opted out. However, no one made fun of them. After all, this was going to be a trip to the hell. Inside the Blood Yuan territory, although the benefits were many, and if one could survive there, then he would definitely reap a lot of benefits. But the reality was much crueler than they had expected, because many experts had died inside the Blood Yuan territory earlier, including some Xiantian masters as well. The core disciples who opted out were mostly the masters of Hotian 8th stage, and their strength was obviously poor compared to other masters of Hotian 9th stage. They could never expect to get good grades, and there was also a chance of getting killed. So, their only option was to give up now when they still had a chance. In this session, the newly promoted core disciples were only Yi Shiwen and Dong Fengbai. Yi Shiwen noticed that Dong Fengbai seemed to be looking forward to this competition, and was also full of energy. From the looks of it, it was obvious that the injury he had received from Zhang Yunfei's hidden poison needle had already healed. Each of you participants will receive a Yao Pai which will record points for you through the competition. Killing a demon beast of 8th stage will reward 10 points, a 9th stage demon beast will reward 50 points, and a Xiantian level demon beast will reward 1,000 points. Also, we have also kept 15 tokens in the Blood Yuan territory which can be of 3 different colors, red, yellow and green, each corresponding to a score of 100, 500 and 1,000. At this time, the Thin Elder further explained. Also, whatever treasures you find there will be converted into points, and only the top 3 disciples, ranked according to their total points, will receive the Blood Yuan fruit as a reward. NT, Yao Pai is basically the plate which will record points. The news immediately shocked the core disciples. Blood Yuan fruit would be given as reward? They did not know that this was the result of an agreement between the two forces. However, Yi Shiwen knew about this in advance and was relatively calm. But this was the Blood Yuan fruit. Even the Xiantian realm masters would consider it a top-class treasure, and could have a breakthrough if consumed. Everyone started to pity the disciples who had already opted out. But if you were defeated or killed, then the score will correspond to a total of that person's accumulated points and will be instantly transferred to the one who defeated you, so you must be very careful. I hope that some of you will come back alive, the Fat Elder said with a sigh, because even he didn't know how many would die in the Blood Yuan territory. But if they survived through this, then they would undoubtedly become an outstanding expert. Yi Shiwen was speechless. The rule actually encouraged killing each other. There were a lot of scoring methods, like, one could kill the demon beasts, or one could collect treasure items to score points. However, none of these were quicker than killing someone and obtaining his accumulated points. No matter how much points a person had earned, it could all be transferred to his killer in an instant. The world of core disciples was really a cruel one, filled with brutality and killing. Compared to core sect disciples, the lives of the inner sect and outer sect disciples were much easier, although they couldn't obtain many resources to practice, but they were relatively well protected. NT. Also, today is a grand release day, so stay tuned for the next 3 chapters. Chapter 49. Chapter 49 Agility Skill Test. The core disciples looked calm and collected, especially those several top disciples. It was obvious that they had already prepared themselves for the coming competition. This time, the core disciples' competition at Blood Yuan territory would not be simple. It was a small territory filled with demon beasts, and they also needed to be wary of the Zhang disciples, and especially their top core disciples, because handling them would not be easy even for the top core disciples of Yi Yuan school. However, if this competition was not difficult or life-threatening, then why would they give 3 Blood Yuan fruits as the reward? Blood Yuan fruit was something even the experts of Xiantian realm dreamt of. Then, the 2 elders led Yi Yuan school's core disciples and headed towards the backside of Qifeng Mountain. Since everyone had practiced agility-type martial arts, all of them were very fast, and only after about half an hour had passed, they entered the depths of Qifeng Mountain. The 2 elders unleashed a terrible aura that surrounded the squad of core disciples, and because of that, the demon beasts did not dare to approach them. This allowed them to smoothly travel to precipitous mountain peak. They were surprised to find that this mountain peak was so high that it seemed as if it was reaching the ends of the sky, and there was also an abnormal steep mountainside which was completely submerged in the sea of clouds. At the foot of that mountain, there were small steps which could accommodate more than one person at the same time. The steps were circling around like a mountain road, going all the way to the summit. In a while, the people of Zhang family also came, led by 2 Zhang elders. One was tall and other was short, with their faces looked cold and skinny. This contrast they made with the fat and slim elders of Yiyuan's school was quite hilarious. However, none of these elders was someone one could laugh at. Behind the 2 elders, there was a group of dozens of Zhang's elite disciples, led by 7 young people. Just from looking at them, one could say that they were all very arrogant and possessed a very imposing aura. From the whispers of the Yiyuan school disciples, Yishuwen finally got to know that these 7 young men were actually this term's top players of Zhang core disciples. The strongest of them were Zhang Jingxin, Zhang Wu, and Zhang Yuelian. All of them were at the peak of Hotian 9th stage and were only a step away from entering the Xiantian realm. While the remaining 4 top disciples were Zhang Yutian, Zhang Wuxiao, Zhang Ziqiu, and Zhang Guiqi, who were at the late Hotian 9th stage. Their imposing aura had completely overwhelmed the Yiyuan school's core disciples. Yiyuan school's top players, who had become quite famous this year, were only 3. Yi Feng had joined later, and Yi Shiwen had suddenly popped out recently. However, even after adding both Yi Feng and Yi Shiwen, numerically, Yiyuan school was still at a disadvantage. Yi Feng initially was only at the peak of Hotian 8th stage, and so, he was not counted among the top core disciples. Yiyuan school's core disciples looked at the top disciples of Zhang family, and Zhang core disciples also looked at Yiyuan school's top disciples. Everyone was aware of the fact that the result of this competition would completely depend on these top 12 players. Yishuwen soon felt a stare from 2 pairs of pernicious eyes, looking at him with pure killing intent. He immediately retraced the stares with his own stare, and saw Zhang Yunfei and Zhang Yuntian. "Now that they've also arrived, let's get started," the fat elder said. It seemed that the 4 elders of Xiantian had a previous agreement. They quickly jumped up and suddenly, their figures rushed towards the mountain road and disappeared in front of everyone in a flash. The 4 Xiantian level elders had disappeared. Several top disciples from both schools didn't wait even for a moment, and jumped out immediately, following after the elders. With their figures like the lightning flash, they had instantly skimmed on the mountain road. Seeing that these talented disciples had already skimmed out without wasting any time, quickly, other core disciples also followed up, but unfortunately, they were already far behind in this race which had ironically just begun. The race had quickly turned into a stampede of disciples due to sudden disappearance of elders and top disciples. In this crowd, the 4 elders of Xiantian level were the fastest, and almost like a lightning, they had disappeared on the mountain road. Next were the Yi Feng and other top disciples of Yiyuan school and Zhang family, which together made the first group. Right behind the first group was the group which mainly consisted of 30 Hotian 9th stage disciples, although they were not the top players. But they had certainly reached the Hotian 9th stage, so their speeds were slightly lower than the top disciples. Next was the group of Hotian 8th stage disciples, but there was a whole 1 stage gap between them, the group of Hotian 9th stage, so their speeds were much lower in comparison. When everyone had already left, Yishuwen finally started and leapt towards the mountain road. Yi Zaiwen's figure was as fast as the lightning. He immediately unleashed the celestial step, and within 2 or 3 breaths, his feet had already embarked on the road. Yi Zaiwen's appearance looked elegant and unrestrained, as if he was taking a stroll. His figure flicked on above the mountain road, and with each flash, it would emerge 10 meters ahead, which clearly displayed his astonishing speed. Celestial Step was a superior agility-type technique, and its applications were totally incomparable. It was much more elegant and unconventional compared to other agility-type techniques. It seemed as if a celestial being was strolling at an astonishing speed. Within a few minutes, Yishiwen had already caught up with the last bunch of disciples in the race, who were far ahead of him initially. The bunch consisted of Hotian 8th stage disciples from Zhang family. Most of these disciples did not know agility-type martial arts. Even if some of them did know, their agility-type martial arts were nothing compared to the Xiantian level celestial step. Also, Yishiwen had practiced it to a Deshang level in special space. Almost in a flash, relying on the incredible speed of celestial step, Yishiwen overtook those disciples. They could not even react because all they saw was a shadow that flew over them for an instant, then disappeared. Now Yishiwen also understood that all of this was to test the agility skill of each and every individual. Generally, if understanding of the agility skill was profound, then one could achieve greater speeds and then, this race would become a child's play. Holy crap! Who is this person? The Zhang disciples could only see Yizaiwen's back from very far and did not recognize who he was. In a flash, Yishiwen had disappeared in front of them. Seeing that Yishiwen had so effortlessly overtaken them in the race, those Zhang disciples felt depressed. Because, no matter how much they tried, they still couldn't catch up with Yishiwen, and this had caused even the glorious masters of Hotian 8th stage to get depressed. They held high status in Zhang family as the 8th stage core disciples, but right now, almost all of these Zhang super experts were depressed. But they were not the only ones who were depressed. When Yishiwen started using the full extent of celestial step and adding his own monstrous strength, he got insanely faster. His figure simply turned into a blur, and he rushed up the mountain path, leaving many of the Yiyuan school and Zhang family disciples behind. They could only give dumbfounded looks to the blurred figure of Yishiwen, who, in a flash, had disappeared from their eyes. Except for secretly getting envious and angry, they could not do anything, and their only option was to keep on running. Chapter 50. NT, I am so happy to release Chapter 50. I had planned to release Chapter 50 and 51 together with 48 and 49 as a grand release, but, thanks to exams, I couldn't achieve my goal. Anyways, exams are over, people, and it's time for some action-packed chapters. Winky face, Chapter 50. It's actually him? Yishiwen's speed was extremely fast and his maneuvers looked so elegant, it seemed as if a celestial being was taking a stroll through the mountains. He had already overtaken the 3rd and 4th groups of Hotian 8th stage disciples. And his speed was getting more and more fast, and in a moment, the 2nd group came into his field of view. This group consisted of Hotian 9th stage disciples. Those disciples in the 2nd group, who were running with all their might, trying to catch up with the 1st group, suddenly heard a burst of rapid footsteps from behind. When they turned to look, they were surprised to find that Yishiwen was catching up with them at an astonishing speed. But before they could get some time to comprehend what was happening, Yizaiwen's figure quickly shuttled across them at an insane speed. The crowd had a stunned look on their faces as they saw Yizaiwen's blurred figure slowly disappear right in front of their eyes. There was no doubt that these people were elite among the elites, and their agility skill techniques were also practiced to a higher level. Most of them had practiced their agility techniques up to the Xiaoqing realm. However, in the face of the mind-boggling speed displayed by Yishiwen, it seemed as if they had not moved at all. They simply couldn't react, and before they could, Yishiwen had already overtaken the 2nd group and had completely disappeared from their sights. After that, Yishiwen began to chase after the 1st group, unhurried, while displaying a rhythmic elegant motion. Although it was very obvious that this was a test of agility skills, but there were no scores involved in this test. So basically, there was no need to be impatient. At this time Yishiwen had run up to the middle of the mountainside, which was wrapped entirely by a dense fog and clouds. The visibility was so less that even the eyesight of a skilled martial arts practitioner like Yishiwen was limited only to a distance of 10 meters. And once someone got careless, they would definitely fall down, meeting a cruel death. Also, even if it was a master of the Hotian 9th stage, the chances of his survival would be 0. Most people would choose to slow down in such a life-threatening situation, but Yishiwen was not afraid of it. Although Celestial Step was an agility technique, and it also increased the speed of the practitioner dramatically, but it was best suited for small-scale maneuvers like this. Also, Yi Shiwen had practiced Celestial Step to the Deshang realm. So, how could he possibly fall down? After a few jumps, he reached the corner of the mountain, and from there, he directly jumped and drilled through the dense fog-shrouded mountainside area. At this time, the first group was already faintly visible from the back, and the one running on the very back of this group was surprisingly Zhang Yuntian, who had challenged Yi Shiwen and lost pathetically. Then the next were Yuan School's Qian Wanru, Wu Hao and Zhang family's Zhang Wuxiao, Zhang Ziqiu and Zhang Guiqi, all in a sequence. They were all keeping their paces without slowing down or going faster. However, Zhang Yutian had fallen behind them and his movements were also not smooth. It was obvious that this was the impact of the injuries he had got in his fight with Yi Shiwen. Zhang Yutian heard footsteps from behind and felt a little strange. He turned his head to look, but what he saw made him completely shocked. "It's actually you, Yi Shiwen!" Before, he had been paying attention to Yi Shiwen, but, just after the start of race, he had discovered that Yi Shiwen had been left far behind and had simply disappeared. He did not care, although he had personal hatred for Yi Shiwen, but right now, he just wanted to concentrate on the race. Being one of the top core disciples from Zhang family, he had a status to maintain. Also, Yi Shiwen was now one of the top disciples from Yi Yuan School and he didn't want to cause problems right from the beginning of the exam. But he would never have thought that Yi Shiwen would actually catch up with the first group. How could he be so fast? When Yi Shiwen came closer, Zhang Yutian took a closer look at his elegant maneuvers and his heart was suddenly taken aback. He always thought that the most impressive skill that Yi Shiwen possessed was his blade skill. From his perspective, Yi Ziwen's blade skill was accurate, decisive, extremely gorgeous, and it could be said that Yi Shiwen was the best blade user in the younger generation of both the schools. But he had not expected that Yi Ziwen's agility skill would also be so terrifying. He knew that his own agility was an intermediate-level technique which he had practiced to the Deshang level. And Yi Shiwen was not even a Hokkien 9th stage master, so how could he possess such an astonishing speed? By now, he had realized that his own speed was nowhere close to Yi Ziwen's speed, and not just that, Yi Ziwen's agility skill was also superior to his own agility skill. However, he knew very well that no matter how superior an agility skill actually was, it was still necessary for the practitioner to practice it to a very profound level in order to attain this level of astonishing speed. While his mind was in a confused state, Yi Shiwen had already caught up with him. In a flash, he had already reached the front part of the first group. By this time, they all had been close to the top of the hill, and Yi Shiwen was finally able to see the figure of those several top disciples, and running in the first place was unexpectedly his elder brother, Yi Feng. Yi Feng was leading the race, and it seemed as if he was flying up the mountain using his extraordinary agility skills, followed by the two disciples of Zhang family, Zhang Jingxin and Zhang Wu. Right behind them was another disciple from Yuan School, Zhang Yang, and finally at the last place was a disciple of Zhang family, Zhang Yuelian. Yi Feng suddenly rushed half a step and became the first person to reach the summit. 4 elders were standing at the summit, waiting for the arrival of disciples, and from their faces, it could be seen that they themselves were very curious to find out about the winner of this race. Seeing that the first one to arrive was Yi Feng, both fat and thin elders had a smile on their faces. Apparently, they were quite satisfied with this outcome. However, the faces of the 2 Zhang elders had a slightly sunken look. Only a single step behind Yi Feng, the second person to arrive was Zhang Jingxin, who had only missed Yi Feng by half a body distance. Similarly, Zhang Wu also reached the summit, falling behind Zhang Jingxin by half a body distance, and Zhang Yang got the 4th place. NT, Zhang Yang is actually a top disciple from Yuan School, so 1st and 4th ranks belong to Yuan School now, and with this, Yuan School's fame had also reached the summit. From the first group of top disciples, only Zhang Yuelian did not come in. He was about to reach the summit with few other disciples behind him, but suddenly, a figure like a lightning instantly overtook Zhang Yuelian and reached the summit. "It's you! Third brother, you are awesome!" This person was actually Yishuan, and this had caused a lot of people to call out in alarm. It was not because they had not noted him. It was because they had paid attention to him from the very beginning. After he had defeated Zhang Yuntian, they had all got wary of his existence, and had also labeled him as a strong enemy. When the race had started, Yishuan had fallen behind and was literally the last person in the race. If he had started running at the same time as others, then his rank would definitely not be fifth. Especially, the complexion of the Zhang disciples was somewhat unsightly. They all knew that if Yishuan had not dawdled in the beginning of the race, then going by his astonishing speed and agility skill, he would definitely have scored a first or second rank in this race, and then first two ranks might have gone to the Yuan school. However, no one continued to think this race mattered for too long, because their main motive was not a race, but the competition at Blood Yuan territory. Immediately, everyone began to meditating to restore the Jinqi that had been consumed while running all the way up to the summit. NT, please point out any mistakes if and when you find out. I was half asleep while editing this chapter. Your corrections will help the readers in the future. Chapter 51. Chapter 51 Blood Yuan territory. All of the disciples had exhausted their Jinqi while dashing all the way up to the summit in one go. However, Yishuan's face didn't seem fatigued at all. Because the Jinqi present in his body was way more vigorous than the masters of the peak Hotian's 7th stage, and the reason for that was the widening of the meridians in his body. Although a large amount of his Jinqi had been consumed, but this consumption was still far from the point where he would feel exhausted. After Yi Zaiwen's arrival, a while later, other disciples had also arrived one by one. All of the disciples had arrived and were resting in order to recover the exhausted Jinqi. When everyone was ready, the elders announced that they were going to open the Blood Yuan territory. 4 elders together summoned a sophisticated sealing method. This was something everyone was waiting for. With a bang, the side of the cliff started to move just like a gate, which slowly opened and a dazzling light came from behind the gate. No one could clearly see anything behind the gate. But Yishuan knew that there was a small world behind this cliff, and this little world was connected to the main world through a constantly changing chaotic space. Good, Blood Yuan territory has been opened. Everyone, quickly go in, but you must remember that you have only a month's time, and within this 1 month's period, you must go to the Fingya Mountain, which is located in the central regions of Blood Yuan territory, and then you must come back as well. If you got lost and couldn't come out in the allotted 1 month's time, then in that case, the next opening time is 10 years later. I hope everyone will keep this in mind, the fat elder explained. More than 200 young experts immediately jumped off and flew into the gate. Yi Zaiwen's movements were definitely not slow, and he shuttled into the gate. He crossed through the distorted chaotic space and finally appeared inside the Blood Yuan territory, and suddenly, he felt the divine Lingqi blowing on his face. This place was rich in divine Lingqi compared to the outside world. If he were to practice here, then he could actually have twice the improvement with half the effort. No wonder this was the most central part of the rumors. Those formidable sects established the core sections of their sect stations in these microcosms, Yishuan said with a sigh. He had seen in some miscellanies that these formidable sects placed the core section of their sects in these small worlds. And not only were these small worlds rich in various resources, which also acted as the last means to resist against the enemy. Those sects possessed supernatural powers, and they would install matrix methods in these small worlds. These matrix methods were controlled by the ancestor of the sect, and in the moment of an emergency, the ancestor would start the matrix method instantly in order to avoid the enemy. He glanced around inside the Blood Yuan territory, and actually saw a small world covered with greenery in all directions. It was a beautiful new world that was small but filled with plenty of Lingqi. Since no one else was around, Yishuan realized that when they had entered the gate, each of them must have been transmitted to a different place inside the Blood Yuan territory. Yishuan gawked for a moment, but he did not stop and headed towards the central region of Blood Yuan territory. The curtain of night gradually descended, and a bright moonlight enveloped the earth resembling a white blanket. It was illuminating the whole piece of land with white and serene light. Inside the dark and gloomy forest, occasionally, several streaks of moonlight projected through the dense foliage on the ground, which was fully covered of fallen leaves, forming luminous spots on the ground, and like this, only a few rays of moonlight were entering this dark and gloomy forest. Deep inside the forest, sometimes, faint roars of unknown beasts would spread, sending the chills down the spine of anyone. Yishiwen had been sauntering inside the Blood Yuan territory for almost a day, and sun had finally set, but even with all of his efforts, he had not encountered a single valuable target in this dark and gloomy forest. Although it was a small world compared to the Jinwujia world, but the size of this world was absolutely not small. A breeze gently caressed against his face, and suddenly a rustling sound spread over from all directions. Yishiwen stopped, and not far from him, there was a nearly 2 meters tall, more than 3 meters long and dark purple-colored leopard quietly standing on the top of the tree branch. Its soft and smooth fur was reflecting the moonlight with a touch of dark and light colors. Its limbs looked strong and full of explosive strength. Its sharp claws could easily tear off its prey, and it had a strong jaw from which it was exuding low and deep roars from time to time. The sight of this demon beast in this moonlit dark night and gloomy forest could easily scare any human. The cold and sharp eyes were staring nonstop at Yishiwen. He had read many books on demon beasts, and after thinking a bit, he finally recognized that this demon beast was called Yuyingbao. It was not just a speed-type demon beast, but it also moved quietly like a shadow, and its dark purple color worked as a camouflage in the night. On top of that, it also possessed an enormous strength. All these traits made this quiet shadow leopard a very tough opponent. Yuyingbao means quiet shadow leopard. Considering its cultivation level, it was definitely a high-level demon beast. The adults of its race could reach the peak of Hotian 9th stage, and some could even evolve into Xiantian realm demon beasts. These beasts lived in the depths of Fingya Mountain. Yishiwen couldn't understand the reason why he encountered one at the edge of the mountain forest. Like a quiet and well-behaved kitten, Quiet Shadow Leopard gracefully jumped from the tree and stepped on the ground covered with leaves. The scariest thing was its silent movements. Although Quiet Shadow Leopard was on a higher cultivation level compared to Yishiwen, and the strength of a demon beast was greater than a human on the same cultivation level. However, Yishiwen was also an anomaly, and his strength couldn't be weighed against his cultivation level. Quiet Yingbao walked slowly in a big circle around Yishiwen, and it seemed as if it was trying to understand him. When it was behind him, suddenly the Quiet Shadow Leopard roared and rushed towards Yishiwen. It opened its huge mouth, displaying countless sharp steel-like teeth shining in the moonlight, and a stench blew on his face. Quiet Shadow Leopard's movements were fast, and its figure looked like a shadow, but Yishiwen was well prepared. He had been paying attention to the movements of this beast, and in an instant he easily dodged the attack of Quiet Shadow Leopard. He instantly drew out his long blade and reflexively chopped out with an incredible force towards the face of that Quiet Shadow Leopard. If his blade had struck its face, then even if the other party was a tough demon beast, its brain would have immediately burst out of its body. However, Quiet Shadow Leopard was clever, and when it saw that the long blade coming straight at its face, it immediately jumped several meters back. It was actually very fast, and after dodging the blade attack, it looked warily at Yishiwen. Boom! With a loud noise, the long blade had punched a 1-foot-long crack in the ground and had also caused a microseism in the surrounding area for a moment. That Quiet Shadow Leopard was looking warily at Yishiwen. He had not expected him to be so monstrously strong. This extent of physical strength was simply too terrifying. Although Quiet Shadow Leopard was at the peak of Hotian 9th stage, but it excelled at speed over strength, therefore it was scared of Yi Zaiwen's terrifying strength. However, even if it was scared of Yi Zaiwen's monstrous strength, it was not willing to leave, constantly producing a deep whooshing sound. Yishiwen noticed that Quiet Shadow Leopard actually knew who was stronger between the two of them, but it had still not left. It was said that demon beasts were comparatively more intelligent than ordinary beasts, and when they would face a stronger opponent, they would try to avoid fighting and prefer to escape. Evidently, This was not necessarily the case this time. Chapter 52. Chapter 52. If you commit suicide, then I will leave your corpse intact. Suddenly, the quiet shadow leopard's shrill roar broke out, and with a faster pace than earlier, it pounced and arrived in front of Yishiwen in a blink of an eye. Its speed was so fast that it literally seemed as if a dark purple lightning had struck. Yishiwen could even see its ghastly scarlet teeth in the moonlight, aiming to bite his neck off. Yishiwen didn't get enough time to think, and the long blade danced in his hands, releasing a terrifying douchi that instantly swept towards the quiet shadow leopard, who jumped away to avoid the attack, but the douchi had already cut off a large wound on its body. After getting injured, it seemed as if quiet shadow leopard had become bloodthirsty. It once again ferociously leapt, raising its sharp claws, and it literally went flying towards Yishiwen. If it had grabbed Yishiwen in its clutches, then even the body an expert as strong as him would get pierced right away. Yishiwen crouched down to avoid its deadly attack, and his backhand blade attacked fiercely towards the quiet shadow leopard's soft lower abdomen. Yishiwen only felt a slight lag, and his long blade's tip inserted into the abdomen of quiet shadow leopard and came directly out of its back, with a lot of blood gushing out of its body. Roar! Quiet shadow leopard gave out a shrill cry. Without the slightest hesitation, Yishiwen gave a backhand twist to his blade, and the jinchi attached to his long blade instantly exploded. In an instant, the quiet shadow leopard's internal organs had been destroyed and looked similar to a pile of mud. Quiet shadow leopard roared twice, and after struggling for a while, it finally died. Yishiwen kicked its dead body to the side while taking his blade out of his body. This Blood Yuan territory was not similar to the outside world. Even the same demon beasts here were more powerful and fiercer compared to their counterparts in the outside world. Quiet shadow leopards were a rare sight in the outside world, however, they were present in abundance here in Blood Yuan territory. The formation of such a small world, according to an old legend, occurred from the broken fragments of space left behind after the fight between ancient experts. The ability of these ancient people was not something Yishiwen could comprehend. In addition to this small world, there were also some secondary planes, with unusual conditions. There were some with extremely cold environment, others filled with volcanic rocks, and each had different kinds of strange life forms existing inside. Legends about them were mentioned in the miscellany, but the information it contained was very ambiguous. In a blink of an eye, 3 days had passed, and Yishiwen had covered a long distance in the direction of central region of Fengye Mountain. Fengye Mountain, in the entire Blood Yuan territory, was very prominent because it was the highest mountain in the Blood Yuan territory, covered with crimson-colored maple trees. Its peak was so high that it actually billowed into the clouds. Fengye Mountain was the goal of Yishiwen, because it was the place where Blood Yuan fruit could be found. As long as he followed into the direction of Fengye Mountain, he would not get lost. However, during these 3 days, it could be said that he did not have a single moment of peace. Demon beasts were present everywhere in the Blood Yuan territory, and the weakest among them had already reached the Hotian 5th stage. There were no weak demon beasts present inside the Blood Yuan territory, and whether it was day or night, he had to be careful of the surprise attacks from these demon beasts, which was quite bothersome for him. But Yishiwen slowly adapted to this rhythm. After all, he had roamed a lot in the backside of Qifeng Mountain Forest, which was also filled with demon beasts. During these 3 days, Yishiwen had beheaded more than a dozen Hotian 9th stage demon beasts, and had also found some very precious herbs. It could be said that he had already made a lot of money on this trip. The points of Yizaiwen's Yaopai had quickly reached 1,000 points, but Yishiwen felt that this was not enough. In fact, it was far from enough. What he desired was the Blood Yuan fruit, because it was a treasure that even Xiantian realm masters would drool over. If he succeeded in obtaining one, then it would be very beneficial towards his future practice. Ha ha ha! It took me 3 days to find you, and I finally find you. Yishiwen, if you commit suicide, then I'll leave your dead body intact. Suddenly, a rampant laughter came from the horizon. A figure grazed over the treetops, and in a while, it had come in front of Yishiwen. It was actually Zhang Yutian. There was a murderous look on his face when he was looking at Yi Shiwen, as if wishing to kill him right now. He was one of the top disciples among the Zhang court disciples, and when he received such a disgrace, it was far worse than getting killed. Although Yi Shiwen had showed him mercy, but in his view, he had actually been humiliated. It was the greatest shame in his life, and the only way to wash the shame off his body was to kill Yi Shiwen. "It's you!" Yi Shiwen said while pulling out the long blade from the scabbard tied to his back. "Yi Shiwen, a few days ago, you humiliated me in front of everyone. My hatred towards you is absolutely irreconcilable. Today is the day of your death, however. If you commit suicide, then I'll leave your dead body intact." Zhang Yuntian laughed, and said, "I see, it seems you have gone deranged. That day, in front of a large crowd, I had showed you mercy, but do you think now you can have such luck?" Yi Shiwen said while sneering again and again. "Today, I'll slaughter you without showing any mercy." Zhang Yunshan's complexion suddenly turned red just like a monkey's ass. Yi Shiwen's words had deeply hurt his pride. "Do you think I have come alone today? Since you refuse to commit suicide, then I will kill you first and feed you to the demon beasts." Zhang Yuntian gritted his teeth and said. Not far from Zhang Yuntian, 5 or 6 figures suddenly emerged and soon arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen quickly recognized them. In addition to Zhang Yuntian's brother Zhang Yunfei, second-ranked top disciple, Zhang Wu, had also come along with Zhang Ziqiu, who was also one of the top core disciples. In total, 7 core disciples, including 3 top figures, had just now appeared in front of Yi Shiwen. Other 4 were also the masters of Hotian 9th stage, although not at the top level like the other 3, but they were still extremely powerful. In order to kill Yi Shiwen, Zhang Yutian had gathered a lot of strong masters. "Yi Shiwen, you will die today. First I will cripple you and feed you to the demon beasts. Then I will watch while you are bitten to death," Zhang Yunfei said with a cruel look on his face. After getting defeated by Yi Shiwen, the 2 brothers had been unable to lift their heads in front of other members of the Zhang family. His heart was filled with extreme hate towards Yi Shiwen, and he just wanted to tear him to shreds and torture him in the most vicious ways possible before killing him. All of this just to eliminate the hate inside of his heart, and to wash off the shame Yi Shiwen had imposed on him. Chapter 53. Chapter 53 Killed Instead. "Yi Shiwen, you will die today. First I will cripple you and feed you to the demon beasts. Then I will watch while you are bitten to death," Zhang Yunfei said with a cruel look on his face. The other Zhang disciples also had a cruel look on their faces. There always was an enmity between Yi Yuan's school and Zhang family, although they maintained a calm and tranquil look on their faces in front of Yi Yuan's school's people, but that was on the surface only. Yi Shiwen was undoubtedly the newly emerging genius of Yi Yuan's school, and suppressing a talent before it had fully grown was the most effective way to eliminate a future threat. Therefore, they had readily accepted Zhang Yunshan's idea to gang up on Yi Shiwen. "You will?" Yi Shiwen sneered and said. "Gee, if so many experts died at once, then it would severely weaken the Zhang family. Everyone, kill this insolent fool, but first, I want him crippled." Zhang Yutian roared with a fierce expression on his face. Several Hotian 9th stage disciples of Zhang family rushed together towards Yi Shiwen with all kinds of martial arts blooming in their hands. Although they were young, but they still were the masters of Hotian 9th stage, so how could their attacks be so simple? Various colorful jinqi exploded together in the air and a terrifying shock wave rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Clang! Yi Shiwen instantly unsheathed his long blade, which was blooming with dazzling light. The long blade directly cut straight through the air towards the arriving shock wave. Boom! Accompanied with a loud air explosion, Yi Ziwen's long blade completely cut off all their attacks. Yi Shiwen's blade instantly drew 9 blade shadows which spread in the sky like a curtain of blades and enveloped the Zhang disciple. "Bold, you are courting death!" Zhang Wu suddenly got furious and gave out a loud shout and suddenly shot a spear with a high degree of proficiency. The spear was covered in a terrifying spurky, and it flew straight towards Yi Shiwen at an astonishing speed. If it had hit Yi Shiwen, then it would have directly pierced right through him, taking his life right away. Even after being attacked by a menacing Zhang Wu, Yi Zaiwen's berserk mode did not stop. In fact, it actually got worse. With a rumbling, thundering sound, his long blade slashed straight towards a Zhang disciple of Hotian 9th stage and instantly bisected him. This was the terrifying New Moon Beheader, and its trademark trait was that it would instantly cover all the escape routes and leave nowhere for the target to run. The only option left would be to face Yi Zaiwen's terrifying long blade head-on. Yi Shiwen pulled back his long blade, splashing the blood drops on it, and instantly attacked towards Zhang Wu's spear. At this time, Zhang Wu's spear had already arrived in front of Yi Shiwen and was about to pierce his body. Dang! A loud metal clashing sound spread all over, and Yi Zaiwen's long blade easily deflected Zhang Wu's spear. Yi Shiwen had beheaded a Zhang disciple, and this had made Zhang Wu very furious. He shouted in a voice filled with anger. Today, even if the great king of immortals was to descend to this place, he would not be able to save you. I will give you a miserable death. You want to kill me? Today, I will decide whether you people are going to live or die. Yi Shiwen screamed, and the long blade in his hands shone brightly like a star. An endless amount of Jinqi burst forth, causing a terrifying air explosion. Missing Moon Beheader. Yi Shiwen roared, and his long blade instantly chopped out towards Zhang Wu like a falling meteor. Boom! Zhang Wu shot a terrifying spurky towards Yi Shiwen. Again. Yi Zaiwen's second blade chopped out almost instantly without any stagnation between the two strikes. Boom! With a loud explosion sound, the long blade struck on Zhang Wu's spear, and he felt that his hands had gone numb. Yi Zaiwen's strength was so terrifying that his blade strike could even explode a mountain. If Zhang Wu was not at the peak of Hotian 9th stage, with his strength already approaching the strength of 99 tigers, then this blade strike was strong enough to send him flying. Zhang Wu's eyes were filled with an inconceivable look because this scene was simply unimaginable. How could Yi Shiwen, who had not even reached the Hotian 9th stage, actually block his offensive spear attacks, and what kind of terrifying strength did he possess in order to repel the attacks from a master of peak Hotian 9th stage? Third blade. The third blade was even more terrifyingly powerful, but at this time, other Zhang disciples finally reacted and rushed over towards Yi Shiwen, all at once. Yi Zaiwen's blade instantly changed direction and chopped off towards Zhang Yunfei. Zhang Yunfei was considered the fastest among the Hotian 8th stage disciples and wanted to torture Yi Shiwen to death. When he saw that Yi Shiwen was busy fighting with Zhang Wu, he had suddenly thought of this as an opportunity, and had rushed up for a sneak attack. Idiot, do you think I couldn't kill you last time? Yi Shiwen shouted, and his long knife completely turned directly towards Zhang Yunfei and chopped off. This strike was lightning fast and immediately chopped down. Don't. Zhang Yunshin's eyes turned red and he exhaled loudly. However, there was no way to save Zhang Yunfei because his fate had already been sealed. Puchi. Zhang Yunfei was frightened when he saw Yi Zaiwen's long blade advancing towards him, but he didn't get any time to react and was instantly split into two halves. No, little brother Yi Shiwen, I am going to kill you. Zhang Yutian had suddenly gone demented and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. But how could he be Yi Zaiwen's match? Yi Zaiwen's long blade, like a brilliant meteor, flew across the sky, while splitting the air and directly chopped down Zhang Yuntian into two halves. Those Zhang disciples could not believe their eyes. How was this possible? In such a short period of time, 3 of their own had been killed by Yi Shiwen, including Zhang Yuntian, who was one of the top core disciples and was quite famous among the Zhang disciples. But he was still chopped down so easily by Yi Shiwen. It was like a calamity to them who had come to kill but had been killed instead. Everyone, kill him! We absolutely cannot let him grow up! Zhang Ziqiu roared. How old was Yi Shiwen? Not even 20 years old, and he was already so terrifying. If he was left to fully grow up, then how terrible he would turn out to be. Just thinking about had sent chills down their spines. Yi Shiwen was dressed in dark green clothes and his black hair was flying wildly. He was carrying a long blade in his hand from which crimson blood was dripping constantly. He had an ice-cold expression on his face which was very frightening, as if the demon god from ancient times had come back to life to wreak havoc on everything. However, before Zhang Ziqiu could finish what he was saying, Yi Zaiwen's Daoqi had chopped down, and before he could even have a chance to react, this Daoqi had already chopped him down into 2 halves. You have actually killed so many people from our Zhang family, you will die, because our Zhang family will not let you off. A Hotian 9th stage disciple clamored. Idiot, no matter how many of you Zhang people I kill here, your Zhang family will have no way to trace it back to me. Moreover, as long as I kill all of you, no one will know that I did it. It is a great idea, isn't it? So I dare you try to run away. Let's see if you can outrun me. Yi Shiwen said and unleashed Celestial Step. As if a celestial being had gone out on a stroll, elegant and effortlessly, he had instantly rushed to the front of that disciple of the Hotian 9th stage and chopped him into many pieces. Yi Shiwen was extremely fast, and his long blade seemed like the thunder itself. Within seconds, he had completely beheaded rest of the Zhang disciples. Zhang Wu turned around to escape and had taken only a few steps, however, was immediately overtaken by Yi Shiwen. The terrifying long blade slashed right at him, and he met his end quite fast. NT. I have translated chapter 55, but translation of chapter 54 will take time. It was boring, so I jumped to chapter 55, tongue sticking out. However, it's already late here and I might go to bed because I am very exhausted. So, I may or may not release chapters 54 and 55 today, in my time zone. Chapter 54. Chapter 54. A mysterious expert appears after all of the Zhang disciples had been killed. Yi Shiwen seized their things. He gained a total of 30,000 low-grade spirit stones. Although they were not as rich as him, but in the end, they still held the position of core disciples, and this amount was enough to call them rich. Also, Yi Shiwen was already rich enough to be compared to a Xiantian realm master. Most importantly, the score on Yi Zaiwen's Yaopai had gone up to 5,000 points. Although, all this time, these people were looking for Yi Shiwen, but they had not forgotten to accumulate points on the way, and that was the reason why their total score was so high. When Yi Shiwen killed them, their combined score got transferred to his Yaopai, and all of a sudden, his accumulated points reached 5,000 points. When the points in his Yaopai increased, he reaffirmed that these rules were truly to encourage mutual fighting. After seizing their things, he didn't stay there for too long. He quickly fled into the forest and disappeared. In the forest, a group of 7 or 8 individuals were rapidly jumping from one tree to another. All of them were the masters of Hotian 9th stage, including this year's strongest top-core disciple of Zhang family, named Zhang Jingxin, and the strongest female top disciple, Zhang Yuelian. The most surprising thing about this group was that it was not being led by Zhang Jingxin or Zhang Yuelian either, but some other guy, a handsome youth who seemed to be in his 20s. Brother Lu, Zhang Jingxin said, these Yiyuan school disciples are very troublesome, so we should just go and kill them all right now. That youth surnamed Lu frowned then said, those Yiyuan school disciples are dispersed throughout the forest. Finding and killing them one by one will take a lot of time. Moreover, those Yiyuan disciples don't pose much of a threat to my plans. It's obvious, Brother Liu's ability is invincible, but that Yiyuan school's Yifeng is said to have entered half a step into the Xiantian realm, and he can be considered as an extremely tough opponent. Also, his brother Yi Shiwen had easily defeated our core disciples, and all those who have seen him fighting say that his strength is unfathomable. Zhang Jingxin said, don't worry, although he has entered half a step into the Xiantian realm, but he is still nothing compared to me. When the time comes, killing him won't be so difficult. The youth surnamed Lu impatiently said, and it doesn't matter, our main focus should be on reaching the Fingyan mountain where blood yuan fruit trees are located. When the time comes, we will obliterate anyone who comes in our way. In order to obtain a Blood Yuan fruit, you people and those core disciples from Yuan school have come to Blood Yuan territory to participate in this core disciples competition. I am determined to win this competition and receive a Blood Yuan fruit, and when the time comes, I will be able to break into the Jindao realm. At that time, you people will also reap a lot of benefits. The youth surnamed Lu said in a relaxed tone. "NT Jindao means the true way. Indeed, indeed, serving under Brother Lu is our greatest pleasure," Zhang Jingxin hastily said. "But you should not be too hasty. Wait for me to enter into the Jindao realm, then promoting all of you into the Xiantian realm will be a child's play." The youth surnamed Lu said, "There's no need to hurry because there's still some time left for the blood yuan fruit to fully mature. Whether yuan school disciples, or those demon beasts, they won't start fighting for the fruit before it fully ripens. Once the time comes, we will attack and kill all of them, whether it's those yuan disciples or the demon beasts of blood yuan territory. Blood yuan fruit won't go anywhere, so we don't need to worry about it for now. I know that yuan core disciples are hiding themselves and planning something. So, let's go and enhance your strengths first, and when the final battle starts, then you all can prove your usefulness." "Yes." Zhang's disciples agreed in succession and looked very excited. After all, they would be able to enhance their strengths, so why wouldn't they be happy? There were innumerable giant trees present inside the Blood Yuan forest, covering the entire range of sight with absolutely no end. One could hear the sound of apes eating and shaking the branches on these giant trees. Several silver-haired violent apes were issuing deafening roars. They had encircled a human figure and were constantly attacking him. These violent apes had enormous palms, resembling a big putuan, and could seriously injure a master of the Hotian 7th or 8th stage. Each of these violent apes was already at the peak of Hotian 9th stage, and adding their violent nature, they were very terrifying. NT, putuan is a cushion or mat, much like futons used in Japan. However, there was a reckless young man standing in the middle of this group of violent apes and was constantly bearing their attacks on his body. Bang! 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 The big palms of these violent apes were ruthlessly hitting on this young man's body, and he was uttering a stressed sound as if trying to bear the intense pain. This young man was none other than Yi Shiwen. Since the killing of Zhang Yuntian and other Zhang disciples, 20 days had already passed. In these 20 days he had spent his maximum time practicing his body and flesh by fighting with the demon beasts unarmed. In the beginning, even though his body was surprisingly strong, but such a direct confrontation with the violent apes had almost killed him. The punches of those violent apes had seriously wounded him. Although Yi Shiwen could have used his true power by using his blade to easily kill all of these apes, but right now, he needed to exceed the limit of his Buddhist strength. So, he was trying to exercise his own body and flesh to an extreme state, and bearing the attacks from these violent apes directly on his body was the best way to strengthen his body. Fortunately, Yi Shiwen possessed a lot of medicinal pills. He had killed many core disciples, and also that young lord named Luo Tian, who was also a Xiantian realm master. Yi Shiwen had seized a variety of high-quality medicinal pills, and whenever he got wounded by fighting unarmed with the violent apes, he would wildly use medicinal pills to heal his injuries. He had continuously used those pills to heal himself, and had trained non-stop for the last 2 weeks. With every injury that got cured, his body would become even stronger, and the tyrant's body technique would also progress a step. This technique was not only able to increase the strength, the toughness of the body and flesh could be rapidly improved, and now, he could easily kill a violent ape using just his hands. NT, imagine Goku's training. Right now, those violent apes were constantly hitting Yi Shiwen's body with their big palms, but their attacks couldn't even move him an inch. Ha! Yi Shiwen gave out a loud shout, and his palms slapped towards a violent ape, and with an explosion, it collided fiercely against its big palm. Rumble! 9 echoes of rushing thunder hand smack that had already come to the point of perfection. Being his first martial arts technique, he had already mastered it to a state of perfection. Bang! Kara! With a loud sound of fractured bone, Yi Shiwen had unexpectedly fractured the arm of a violent ape in one move. Roar! Violent ape bellowed, but Yi Shiwen didn't stop and again slapped on the chest of violent ape, and this attack was fast that there was no way for the violent ape to dodge it. His palm, wrapped in a snow-white jinchi, smashed into the chest of a violent ape with an incredible force, and went right through its body. A violent ape had been killed, and right at that moment, other violent apes severely slapped their big hands on Yi Zaiwen's body. Bang! 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 Chapter 55. Chapter 55. Hotian 9th stage. The attacks of these violent apes left shallow blue bruises on Yi Zaiwen's body, but within a few breaths' time, all of these bruises completely disappeared. Yi Zaiwen's body had become very formidable. Yi Shiwen turned around 180 degrees and gave a solid punch to a violent ape, killing it instantly. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bang! Yi Shiwen curled his fingers into a fist and punched out violently, which caused many air explosions. Bang! A loud noise of explosions spread out, and an endless amount of jinqi burst out everywhere in the surrounding. Boom! 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 Clang! With the sound of unsheathing a blade, a foot-long daoqi emerged from Yi Zaiwen's palm. Pick! Stab! Chop! Cut! A move after move, Yi Shiwen continued to use the blade skills using his palms instead of his long blade. Each of his moves would kill a violent ape instantly, although these violent apes were at the Hotian 9th stage, but they still weren't his match. Yi Shiwen is using a daoqi in his hands to display his blade skills. Yi Shiwen estimated that their combat strengths should be in between Hotian and Xiantian realms. They were the so-called half-step into Xiantian realm-type demon beasts. Now Yi Shiwen could have a breakthrough anytime, and once he had a breakthrough, then he would be able to easily compete with a Xiantian realm master. The strength of his mortal body had already reached the strength of 99 tigers. That was the peak level for a Hotian realm expert. And if he continued to temper his body with all kinds of external forces, then his strength would finally reach the strength of a dragon. This unceasing massacre by Yi Shiwen had finally angered the violent ape king. It was a huge violent ape with its whole body covered with fiery red hair. There was a grim look on its face, and a pair of bloody red eyes was staring maliciously at Yi Shiwen. The violent ape king punched out its gigantic fist, and each fist produced layer upon layer of fire waves rushing towards Yi Shiwen. Bang! 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 Yi Shiwen gathered the qi into both his palms and directly shot up in the air, causing a huge air explosion accompanied with a sharp, loud sound. Roar! Violent Ape King fiercely punched into Yi Zaiwen's chest, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, right at that moment, he also gave a lightning-fast direct kick on its belly. Dang! It felt as if Yi Shiwen had directly kicked on a steel plate. The violent Ape King only felt a momentary numbness in its body from the terrifying strength present in his kick, and retreated a few steps. This was not the first time he had fought with Violent Ape King. During the first fight, he had nearly died at the hands of Violent Ape King because it was a demon beast that had actually entered half a step into the Xiantian realm. These types of demon beasts were terrifyingly strong and could be compared to a semi-transformed Xiantian master. Yi Shiwen truly felt how overpowering a Xiantian master's strength could be. Although he had beheaded Luo Tian before, but he had already been wounded by Hua Menghan and was extremely weak. Otherwise, on that day, he would have died instead. All this time, Yi Shiwen had just been playing around with this giant ape, training his body externally at the same time. If he was just an ordinary master of peak Hotian 9th stage, then he would definitely have died at the hands of these violent apes. However, the tyrant's body technique had showed its terrible power during this training. Although his body looked slim, but it actually contained an explosive power condensed inside it. Although right now, Yi Shiwen was a lot weaker than Violent Ape King, but as long as he didn't receive a direct frontal attack from it, he could continue to heal his minor injuries by eating the medicinal pills, and like this he could keep on playing around with the Violent Ape King. Initially, his punches and kicks almost had no effect on the Violent Ape King, and even if he tried his best, he couldn't shake its huge body. But now, he had become stronger, and could easily push it several steps back. In such a short interval of 10 days, the progress in his Bodhi's strength was simply unbelievable. The continuous process of getting beaten up and healing, again and again, to rapidly increase the body strength had actually worked. And finally, he had reached the critical point of Hotian 8th stage and was only a step away from Hotian 9th stage. Once he entered the Hotian 9th stage, he would be able to climb a step above his current strength of 99 tigers, and would finally acquire the strength of a dragon. Yishuan suddenly took out his long blade from the scabbard on his back, which released a bright light, and a daochi, shaped like a long blade, chopped out towards the Violent Ape King. Violent Ape King suddenly punched out fire waves towards Yishuan, but these fire waves were instantly chopped down by the daochi, which then rushed forward and directly collided into its huge fist. Yu Zaiwan's blade attack was so fierce that it had actually cut out deep wounds on its body. Even the bones were visible, and the blood was constantly flowing out of these wounds. Roar! The Violent Ape King suddenly cried out in pain, and its eyes looked even more brutal. Numerous flames flared out from the gaping wounds on its body, and the scene resembled a volcanic eruption. The Violent Ape King had directly turned into a violent flaming ape. Flames burst out from the punch of Violent Ape King and rushed towards Yishuan. But he calmly looked into the blood-red eyes of Violent Ape King, because he sensed that its movements had started to look very slow. Boom! Suddenly, something exploded inside Yishuan's body, and he, who had not been able to have a breakthrough for a long time, finally had breakthrough. Tyrant's body technique suddenly started to revolve wildly inside his body. The strength of 99 tigers started to gather at one point inside his body and started to transform into an immense strength. His strength was no longer decentralized and had started to unite together. Boom! At this moment, Tyrant Body Technique finally broke through to the first layer of the Xiaoqing realm, and he finally acquired the strength of a dragon. Yishuan heard a faint voice of a dragon within his body. He fiercely opened his eyes. An imposing aura spread out, and he threw a kick towards the Violent Ape King. Bang! Yishuan once again kicked the Violent Ape King. However, this time, the terrifying strength of a dragon present in his kick directly blasted away the Violent Ape King, and it tumbled down to one side. However, he did not continue to chase after it to give the killing blow, because he sensed that the Jinqi inside his body had begun to stir up and was constantly revolving around. Yishuan knew that he was about to have a breakthrough. Yishuan constantly condensed the Jinqi inside his body. His body had already acquired a touch of Xiantian Jinqi, and at this moment, this early experience had played a guiding role in transforming countless amount of Hotian Jinqi into the Xiantian Jinqi. He didn't know how much time had already passed. It seemed like many years had passed, but also like only a few seconds had passed. After he had condensed the Jinqi, he felt that 10% of the Hotian Jinqi inside his body had fully transformed into Xiantian Jinqi. Boom! Yishuan finally broke through to the Hotian 9th stage. After breaking through to the Hotian 9th stage, Yishuan suddenly laughed out and once again looked towards the Violent Ape King with a glorious look in his eyes. His blade shined brightly, and Daoguang rushed towards the mighty Violent Ape King and chopped it into two halves. NT Daoguang means blade light. Chapter 56. Chapter 56. Towards the Fingyam Mountain, Yishuan was unbearably delighted in his heart, and why wouldn't he be? He finally acquired the strength of a dragon, and 1/10 of his Jinqi had already converted into Xiantian Jinqi. He was confident that now, he could easily compete with a Xiantian master. Yishuan had found Luo Tian's notes in his storage ring and learned from it that Xiantian realm was also divided in 9 stages, and these stages depended on the amount of Jinqi already transformed into Xiantian Jinqi. If 10% of Jinqi had transformed into Xiantian Jinqi, then the expert would break into the Xiantian first stage. If 20% of Jinqi had transformed into Xiantian Jinqi, then the expert would reach the peak of Xiantian first stage. If 30% of Jinqi had transformed into Xiantian Jinqi, then the expert would break into the Xiantian second stage. In other words, now that he possessed the strength of a dragon, and had also successfully transformed 10% of his Jinqi into the Xiantian Jinqi, he could open up the world bridge of Xiantian realm, and then he would be able to compete with a Xiantian first stage master, though he would still lack the endurance of a Xiantian master. However, his strength would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. But this happiness was short-lived, because even if he could compete with a Xiantian master, but after all, he had not yet entered the Xiantian realm and there was still a long way to go. Almost half a month had passed with only 10 days left. Within this time, he needed to continue to increase his score, although he had already gained a lot of points by killing those Zhang disciples, but he still felt that his score was not enough to win a blood yuan fruit. Now that his fighting power was comparable to that of a Xiantian master, it had become too simple for him to earn points, because now, even the demon beasts of peak Hotian 9th stage were simply not his match. Days passed, Yishuan beheaded many demon beasts on the way to Fengye Mountain, and his score also increased rapidly. 5 days later, his total accumulated points had gone over 10,000 points, and during this period, he had also found a yellow token. He didn't have an experience of this kind of competition, and he didn't know if the score of 10,000 points was good enough or not. So, he had followed the rule of the more the better and had continued to collect as much points as he could. However, the time to exit the Blood Yuan territory had almost arrived and Yi Shiwen rushed towards the central region of Fengye Mountain. There, Blood Yuan fruit was about to mature, and at that time, Blood Yuan territory would open up and the 4 elders would come inside to reward the fruits to the top scorers. There was no need to worry about someone picking up the Blood Yuan fruits in advance, because if it was picked by someone before it had fully matured, then it would lose all its miraculous properties and become a useless fruit. Everyone, including Xiantian demon beasts, knew about this fact and wouldn't touch it before it fully matured. Those Xiantian-level demon beasts possessed wisdom. In fact, it could be said that after entering into the Xiantian realm, demon beasts gained intelligence and wisdom. As these Xiantian-level demon beasts grew stronger, their wisdom also increased with their strengths. These wise demon beasts were called true demon beasts, and the Hotian realm demon beasts were nothing compared to them. Even formidable demon beasts could change their appearance into that of a human, and they belonged to the race named Yaozu race. Yaozu means demon race. Near the forest of Fengye Mountain, a group of dozens of Yi Yuan school disciples had gathered. The group was being led by both Yi Feng and Zhang Yang in the direction of central region of Fengye Mountain. According to the time informed by the elders, Blood Yuan fruit was about to mature, and then they would also be able to get out of the Blood Yuan territory. In a blink of an eye, a month had already passed, and it was enough to gather all of the Yi Yuan disciples together, and at the same time, also hunt for the points. The sole purpose of this rule was to encourage the two sides to kill each other. After entering this dimension, all of the disciples had been scattered throughout the territory, and similar to Zhang family, Yi Yuan school disciples had also searched for each other and gathered together, because staying alone and away from the main group could be life-threatening. In the beginning, both sides had a lot of casualties. Both sides had killed a lot of strayed disciples from the other side until Zhang family and Yi Yuan school disciples had gathered their own disciples and formed their respective groups. In addition to that, Xiantian demon beasts had almost disappeared from Blood Yuan territory. Every 10 years, both schools would send a large number of Xiantian masters into the Blood Yuan territory, and they had exterminated almost all of the Xiantian demon beasts because these beasts required decades to reach the Xiantian realm. So, it could be said that the Blood Yuan territory didn't have any Xiantian demon beasts left, and even if there were some left, then they were only a few in numbers. And this was the reason why Yi Yuan school had finally agreed to the idea of Zhang family to send their core disciples together inside the Blood Yuan territory. If there were Xiantian demon beasts running amok inside the territory, then they certainly wouldn't send their core disciples to their deaths. Also, Yi Feng had already entered half a step into the Xiantian realm, and his presence had helped in reducing the casualties to a minimum. However, a lot of core disciples had died and the death count was at least over 15 disciples. All of they were the core disciples of Yi Yuan school, and losing even one could be considered a great loss for the school, but losing 15 of them was definitely a severe loss for the Yi Yuan school. Of course, Zhang family had also lost a lot of their core disciples. This competition is now coming to an end, Yifeng said. We will immediately go to Fingye Mountain and wait for 2 elders to arrive. Although, they might encounter the Zhang crowd on the way to Fingye Mountain, but they had no choice. The fight between the 2 sides was inevitable. Moreover, they needed to hurry and reach there before those Zhang disciples could, so as to stop them from getting their hands on the blood yuan fruit. Everyone's face had lighted up because they were finally getting out of here. In this month, their strengths had greatly improved. There were more than a dozen who were initially at the peak of Hotian 8th stage and had broken through to the Hotian 9th stage. For many disciples, the purpose of coming here had already been achieved and they had also greatly honed their skills. But we need to be careful of those sneaky Zhang bastards, Yifeng continued. This month, I have always felt that something's wrong. Except for the first few days of skirmishes, it suddenly got so peaceful. This is not their style. You are right, but there are so many people in our group and all of their plots will be totally useless against us, Zhang Yang said with a smile. Although, the fat elder had commented that this year's group of core disciples was a lineup of losers, but that was not the case. Zhang Yang was confident that there were enough people in their squad to take care of those Zhang disciples, and as far as those top disciples were concerned, if he and Yifeng joined forces then they could easily take care of them. So Zhang Yang was not worried at all. Chapter 57. Chapter 57. Zhang family's bastards die. There were a lot of giant blood-red trees on top of the Fingye Mountain, and a bunch of 9 mouth-watering red fruits could be seen hanging from one of those trees, exuding a very seductive aroma which was gradually spreading out in the surrounding area. These were the precious blood yuan fruits found in blood yuan territory. Under those blood yuan fruit trees, there was a huge pile of corpses of demon beasts, ranging from the Hotian 9th stage demon beasts to even half a step Xiantian demon beasts. Next to these corpses, 2 groups were confronting each other. The group of Yuan school disciples was being led by Yifeng and Zhang Yang, while the Zhang's group was being led by the mysterious youth surnamed Lu. You people are really mean! You actually plan to have sole possession of all blood yuan fruits? Zhang Yang said coldly while staring at the Zhang disciples. Give up the idea, because when our elders will arrive, you guys are really going to get it. Let's beat these bastards to death. All of the Yuan school disciples were furious and started shouting. Yifeng narrowed his eyes but did not speak anything. He had led all of the Yuan school disciples all the way up to here, and after arriving here, they had encountered a group assault from a flock of demon beasts. They had faced a lot of difficulty in beheading all of those demon beasts, and right after this, these Zhang disciples had appeared to take away all of the blood yuan fruits. This matter had gone totally out of hand. If you are not willing to give up, then die! Zhang Jingxi narrowed his eyes and said in a cold voice. You will kill all of us? Then we will find you and send a punitive expedition to punish all of you. A Yuan school disciple got furious and said, Ha ha ha, punitive expedition to find us. For what reason? You Yuan school disciples were all killed and eaten by the demon beasts, so why do we have to be responsible for your deaths? Zhang Guiqi laughed loudly and looked at the Yuan school disciples as if looking at dead people. The complexion of the Yuan school disciples suddenly paled. Was it possible that these Zhang disciples had planned to kill them all and pretend that they had been massacred by the demon beasts? And if their Yuan school could not produce strong evidence to prove what actually happened? Since these disciples of Yuan school are so stubborn, massacre them all, the cloaked youth surnamed Lu said. Zhang disciples did not hesitate to release bursts of murderous aura. Yifeng also jumped into the fight, but in just 1 month, the strength of these Zhang disciples had actually improved a lot. But Yifeng was relieved to see that 3 of the Zhang's 7 top disciples were not present. He could only see 4 of them, and being half a step into the Xiantian realm, he could easily handle 4 experts of peak Hotian 9th stage. However, he certainly did not know that the other 3 had already been beheaded by Yishiwen. However, Yifeng was getting a bad intuition about that mysterious cloaked youth. He was having a dangerous feeling, and this intuition of his had saved him many times in the past. The youth surnamed Lu suddenly rushed out, and Yi Feng actually saw that each of his steps was creating a huge crack on the ground. A terrifying, imposing aura unleashed from the body of that mysterious youth and locked firmly on Yi Feng. Xiantian, he is actually a Xiantian master! Yi Feng was startled because, being half a step into the Xiantian realm, he very well understood how much terrifying a Xiantian master could be. For martial artists, the Xiantian realm was like the first step. Houtian realm was like laying the foundation, and becoming a Xiantian master was like completing the first transformation. A terrifying, imposing aura had spread throughout the area and was completely suppressing the morale of the crowd like a mountain itself, and a normal human being would definitely faint under such pressure. This was the coercion of a Xiantian master, and those disciples could bear it only because they were considered elite among the elites and possessed firm minds. For ordinary disciples, only a look from a Xiantian master was enough to severely injure or kill them. Everybody run, wait for the arrival of our two elders, then we will settle things with them, Yi Feng shouted. He drew a long sword from his back and stood in front of everyone to give them a chance to escape. Ha 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 ha, do you think they can come in? The youth surnamed Lu suddenly laughed, and said and looked at Yi Feng and other Yuan disciples, as if watching a group of ants. This space has already been sealed from inside. Someone will come to your rescue. Stop dreaming, ha 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 ha! What? Yuan school disciples felt a shock in their hearts. The space had been sealed? It actually meant that Blood Yuan territory had been locked, and no one would be able to leave or come inside. They had been trapped inside to die. They go too far, everyone, let's fight with them! A Yuan school disciple roared. Yes, let's fight. We want die like scapegoats. Overconfident, kill them all, do not leave even a single one alive! The cloaked youth surnamed Lu said in a cold voice. However, his eyes were constantly staring above at the matured Blood Yuan fruits. His eyes were revealing a greedy look. That youth surnamed Lu suddenly drew out his long blade and instantly chopped out a terrifying coercion accompanied with a dazzling daoguang which rushed towards Yi Feng. NT. Daoguang means blade light. The surrounding aura instantly condensed into a row of daoqi which clustered together into a roaring dragon and instantly flew towards Yi Feng. Yi Feng struck his sword and the jianqi erupted out of its tip, containing even more power than that of the peak Houtian 9th stage. Boom! A fierce collision occurred between the daoqi and jianqi in the air and caused a terrifying blast which sent out a layer after layer of strong air waves in all directions. The power of daoqi released by the youth surnamed Lu didn't diminish and severely hit Yi Feng's body. Poof! Yi Feng spat a mouthful of blood and his body was sent flying upside down. Overconfident, the youth surnamed Lu said with disdain. Brother! Yi Rixue rushed out from the crowd and ran up to the side of her brother Yi Feng. Do it, kill all of them and leave no one alive, Zhang Jingxin cruelly said. Zhang disciples screamed loudly and rushed towards the Yi Yuan school disciples. Suddenly, a loud piercing sound came out of nowhere and spread throughout the sky together with a huge daoqi which chopped out instantly towards the group of Zhang disciples. Zhang family's bastards die. A loud voice thundered in the sky. Several Zhang disciples tried to escape but couldn't and instantly got chopped down into pieces. Who is it? That youth surnamed Lu was the first to shout. It's me. A figure could be seen from far, getting closer. The eyes of everyone were filled with horror, because it was actually Yi Shiwen. It's actually you? How is this possible? You should not be, Zhang Jingxin said with an unbelievable look on his face. It's quite unexpected, right? Yi Shiwen sneered and said, Unfortunately, it didn't happen the way you had wished for because I have already chopped down those several other Zhang losers you sent after me. How dare you? Zhang Jingxin said in a shocked tone because they were not just one of the ordinary core disciples. They were one of the top 7 disciples of Zhang family, and out of those 7 top Zhang disciples, Yi Shiwen had already slaughtered 3. Zhang Jingxin immediately became furious. NT, I am currently editing chapter 58 and 59. It will take time, so expect them in few hours. Chapter 58. Chapter 58. Suppressing a Xiantian. Like the disciples of Yuan school, the disciples of Zhang family, after practicing to a certain extent, would also enter into the Tianfeng Hall. Zhang family was itself considered a high-level family in the Tianfeng Hall, and every year, a lot of Zhang disciples would enter into the Tianfeng Hall. Like any place, Tianfeng Hall also had a very intense competition among the sections. Large and small forces would always be competing with each other. Zhang Jingxin was this year's ringleader for Zhang family, and in the future, this group would also be led by him. Yi Shiwen had killed 3 important disciples from his future team, and by doing so, he had enraged Zhang Jingxin. With the sudden appearance of Yi Shiwen, the morale of Yi Yuan school disciples had boosted up. "Fuck these bastards! Kill!" The morale of Yi Yuan school disciples had immediately mobilized. "You are courting death," the youth surnamed Lu said in a cold voice. "Attack!" The Zhang disciples immediately rushed towards the Yi Yuan school disciples. Boom! The two sides severely clashed against each other like the two mighty currents in an ocean. The eyes of the disciples from both sides had become bloody red with killing intent. "Boy, you are courting death!" Zhang Jingxing roared and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. That youth surnamed Lu looked towards the blood yuan fruits on the hilltop and flew up to snatch them. But how could Yi Shiwen allow him to succeed? He instantly pursued after Lu, skimming up the hill. However, right at this moment, Zhang Jingxin's sword rushed over and stabbed towards Yi Shiwen. "Get the fuck out of my way!" Yi Shiwen shouted. The Daoguang horizontally chopped down a mighty Daoqi which swept away towards Zhang Jingxin. Bang! Zhang Jingxin's Jianqi was simply not powerful enough to even put a scratch on Yi Ziwen's body. And just like Yi Feng was helpless in front of the youth surnamed Lu, he was also in a similar situation and was definitely not a match for Yi Shiwen, who had already condensed 1/10 of his Jinqi into the Xiantian Jinqi. The difference between the Xiantian and Hotian Jinqi was more qualitative than quantitative. This meant that even a small amount of Xiantian Jinqi was strong enough to beat a huge amount of Hotian Jinqi. In addition to that, Yi Ziwen's strength was much better compared to Zhang Jingxin's strength. So, when the long blade of Yi Shiwen chopped down, it directly deflected the sword of Zhang Jingxin and sent him flying like a broken kite, spitting a mouthful of blood. Yi Shiwen didn't even stop to look at Zhang Jingxin and continued to pursue after that youth surnamed Lu. "How dare you stop me?" the youth surnamed Lu furiously said. "Shabu!" The youth surnamed Lu turned back in a flash and chopped out his blade twice towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen instinctively used his long blade, causing the Jinqi to burst out, and a Daoqi horizontally chopped out towards the youth surnamed Lu. Boom! The two similarly tyrannical Daoqi met in midair and collided, which caused a terrifying blast. "How is this possible?" The youth surnamed Lu people saw the Daoqi released by Yi Ziwen's long blade and suddenly said in a surprised tone, "Impossible! How can you possess Xiantian Jinqi?" As a master of the Xiantian, he could easily sense the Xiantian Jinqi. But he could clearly feel that Yi Shiwen was definitely not a Xiantian expert. But how could he possess such a huge amount of condensed Xiantian Jinqi, when he was still a Hotian realm expert? "Impossible?" Yi Shiwen sneered. With just an exchange of blows, he had already found out the ins and outs of this youth surnamed Lu. Undoubtedly, he was a Xiantian master, but he was still way weaker compared to Luo Tian. And most importantly, just from looking at his Jinqi, Yi Shiwen had realized that Lu had just entered into the Xiantian realm, and had not even transformed 10% of his Jinqi into the Xiantian Jinqi. This was the biggest advantage for Yi Shiwen. "You should worry about yourself first. You injured my brother, ordered an attack on the disciples of my Yi Yuan school. For doing all this, I will take everything back from you with interest." Yi Shiwen screamed and attacked again. Seeing that ridiculously powerful Lu had been completely pushed down by Yi Shiwen, suddenly, the morale of Yi Yuan school disciples reached its pinnacle. They didn't fear Zhang disciples, but they were scared of that powerful youth surnamed Lu, because even Yi Feng, the most powerful core disciple of Yi Yuan school, was not a match for this enemy and had been easily defeated. This had made them feel insecure about their future, but now, although they did not know how Yishuan would resist the Xiantian master, but he had already blocked an attack from Lu, which was good news for them at that time. The Yuan school disciples understood that this was a battle of life and death, and there was no possibility of mutual compromise. They immediately rushed into the battlefield and clashed against the Zhang disciples. The youth surnamed Lu suddenly flew off the ground to dodge an attack from Yishuan. But Yi Zaiwen's blade skill had already reached the ultimate level, and the speed of his blade attack was so fast that it had instantly arrived in front of Lu. Lu was very depressed. He was a dignified Xiantian master, but he had actually been pressed down by a master of the Hotian realm. Yes. He had been completely suppressed by Yishuan. Because Yishuan actually had the power of a dragon, which was not beneath the strength of Lu, and Yishuan had already transformed 10% of his Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi. That was also more compared to the extent of transformation achieved by that youth surnamed Lu. Lu was considered a genius in the Tianfeng Hall, but today, he was getting suppressed by a master of the Hotian realm. How could he accept this? He suddenly yelled out, "The flaming blade!" Suddenly, the Jinqi attached to his long blade instantly started to burn up, and from afar, it looked like a flaming blade. The flaming blade danced in the hands of the youth surnamed Lu. The burning air produced sizzling noise, and a terrifying heat wave rushed towards Yishuan. The amount of heat present in this flaming blade's heat wave attack was astonishing. This astonishing heat wave instantly swept towards Yishuan. Yishuan sneered again and again. He instantly chopped down his Daoqi in the sky, directly towards the incoming heat wave. The terrifying Daoqi suddenly broke out, and the incredible pressure present in his Daoqi instantly suppressed that astonishing heat wave. Boom! 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 The two terrifying Xiantian Jinqi fiercely collided and caused an intense explosion. During their confrontation, the youth surnamed Lu had been completely pressed down by Yishuan. Yi Zaiwen's blade chopped out non-stop, and instantly released 9 blade shadows which covered the sky and a curtain of countless blades which completely enveloped the youth surnamed Lu. "How could I, an invincible Xiantian master, be defeated by you?" The youth surnamed Lu suddenly said in a frightened tone. He could not accept that he had actually been completely suppressed by Yishuan. Boom! The youth surnamed Lu had no way left to escape, and could only wait for Yi Zaiwen's blade to arrive. The terrifying strength of Missing Moon Beheader exploded and had actually enlarged to a frightening extent. The youth surnamed Lu was like a prey in the lion's den, waiting to get mutilated. In spite of that, Yishuan once again chopped out a brilliant Daomeng towards the youth surnamed Lu. NT. Daomeng means blade tip. NT. Chapter 59 in few hours. Chapter 59. NT. Since many of you guys got impatient, so I am releasing this chapter today. Chapter 60 to 63 will come as a grand release tomorrow. Chapter 59. Beheading a Xiantian. Yi Zaiwen's blade had become even more terrifying when he had used the Xiantian Jinqi along with his blade skills. Lu had just entered into the Xiantian realm, but Yishuan was not even a Xiantian expert. Then how could he use Xiantian Jinqi so easily? Lu was shocked, because, compared to him, Yishuan was more skilled at using the Xiantian Jinqi. But Yishuan also knew that he was not a Xiantian expert like Lu, and his ability to recover the consumed Xiantian Jinqi was very slow compared to that of Lu. Even if he had converted 10% of his Jinqi into the Xiantian Jinqi, but once exhausted, it would take a lot of time to recover. So, he didn't have the luxury of having a protracted fight with Lu. But obviously, Lu knew that this was the only weakness of Yishuan, so he made up his mind to drag on this fight and keep on running until Yishuan had fully exhausted his Xiantian Jinqi. Regarding those Zhang disciples, he simply didn't care whether they lived or died. To him, they were nothing more than sacrificing pawns, and as long as he could attain a blood yuan fruit, he wouldn't feel a thing even if they were to die. Yi Zaiwen's long blade released a tyrannical Daoqi, and his Xiantian Jinqi filled the air. He was not planning to drag this battle for too long, and wanted to finish it as soon as possible. Yi Zaiwen's long blade was tyrannically powerful. Just from a look, it could be seen that Yi Zaiwen's understanding of the blade's skills was far superior to that of Lu, although both of them had practiced their blade skills to the same level. Yi Zaiwen's Daoqi was similar to a storm, and Liu's Daoqi was like a flickering candle in the wind, which could extinguish any moment. "How can you be so strong?" the youth surnamed Lu said, and he finally couldn't maintain the usual cold expression on his face, and his complexion had turned pale. The existence of a Hotian expert, who could actually have an upper hand while fighting a Xiantian master, was something incomprehensible to him. He had never heard of such an incredible expert before. Yi Shiwen didn't care why the other party was surprised, because he knew very well that he didn't have the luxury to waste any more time. He needed to quickly finish this battle. Die! Yi Shiwen chopped out an enlarged and extremely tyrannical new moon beheader once again, and 9 blade shadows fully enveloped the youth surnamed Lu. "How is this possible? I am Lu Ji and I am considered as a genius. Like hell I would die in such a damned place. One day, I would enter into the Jindao realm and become invincible." The youth surnamed Lu roared and his flaming blade chopped out. Boom! The blade shadows clumped around Lu Ji, and his movements were severely constricted by the long blade of Yi Shiwen. Right then, Yi Zaiwen's eyes flashed because he realized that this was the opportunity he was looking for. Yi Shiwen had been waiting for an opening like this, and it had finally appeared. He was getting the upper hand, and his plan was to take advantage of Liu's constricted movements. His blade chopped out, and several blade shadows obscured the sky where each of these blade shadows was false, but also real at the same time. He had practiced New Moon Beheader to the Desheng realm, and that had turned this attack into an extremely devastating one. This seemingly aimless and scattered blade attack had put Lu Ji in a very difficult situation. Dang! 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 A loud metal clashing sound spread everywhere, accompanied by an air explosion. The area surrounding the two of them had become a forbidden death zone, and none of the other disciples had dared to go closer. But they did not mind those two, because they themselves were busy in fighting with each other, although their fighting level was way below compared to the big fight of Lu Ji and Yi Shiwen. But they still were the core disciples of Hotian 8th or 9th stage, and were fighting desperately in a life and death battle, where anyone could kill or get killed. Yi Zaiwen's tyrant body technique had also reached the first layer of the Xiaoqing realm. Not only had his strength successfully surpassed the strength of 99 tigers, his body had also become insanely tough, causing even his gestures to possess a terrifying strength. By practicing tyrant body technique, one could attain the overbearing strength of a tyrant, and even a single physical attack from the practitioner would be devastating for the enemy. By practicing it, one could become overbearingly invincible. His blade skill was already at the level of a sword overlord, and he also possessed tyrant body technique. Having blade skills of sword overlord and body strength of a tyrant complemented each other. Yi Zaiwen's body was tougher compared to that of Lu Ji. Even his blade skill had reached an ultimate level and was better than Lu Ji's blade skill. This had put Lu Ji into an extremely difficult situation. Everyone was watching this fight and was somewhat astonished. Yi Shiwen was so insanely strong that he had completely suppressed the Xiantian realm master, Lu Ji, to such a pathetic state. Lu Ji was extremely depressed. He never thought that a day like this would come in his life, where he would be pressed down by a Hotian realm expert. Missing Moon Beheader, the first blade! Yi Shiwen finally played his trump, and his Daoqi directly rushed towards Lu Ji. Boom! Lu Ji's terrifying Xiantian Jinqi merged with his blade, which turned into a boundless Daoqi and swept across the blade. The second blade! With a lightning speed, Yi Shiwen chopped out the second blade. He constantly poured out his Xiantian Jinqi into his blade to form a terrible Daoqi, and it swept towards Lu Ji. Boom! Lu Ji's hand began to crack under the power of Missing Moon Beheader because the power present in Yi Zaiwen's attack had increased to a terrifying level. Third blade. Yi Shiwen did not stop and chopped out yet another blade, as if to capture the heaven and earth. Bang! Lu Ji's blade instantly shattered under the terrifying force present in Yi Zaiwen's attack. How is this possible? This can't be happening to me. Lu Ji yelled in a frightened voice, and it seemed as if he had completely lost his mind out of fear. "Nt. Jinghuang Shitsua is an idiom which means to lose one's head out of fear." After seeing that Yi Shiwen had chopped out the fourth blade, Lu Ji suddenly shouted, "No, you cannot kill me, I am." However, he did not get enough time to finish what he was trying to say because Yi Zaiwen's long blade had already chopped out the fourth blade, and in a flash, Yi Zaiwen's terrifying Daoqi instantly split him in half and his blood splattered everywhere. When Yi Shiwen suddenly chopped his blade, his body's Xiantian Jinqi had been completely depleted in this attack. Since his inner state had not broken through to the Xiantian realm, so he didn't possess endless Xiantian Jinqi like Lu Ji. The power of Missing Moon Beheader was significant, and blades were stacked together, and were chopped out one after another, causing the total power to reach a terrifying level, but the degree of consumption of Jinqi would also rise proportionally. Initially, when Yi Shiwen was using his blade attacks on Lu Ji, then his Xiantian Jinqi consumption was not that much, but when he chopped out the fourth blade of Missing Moon Beheader, then all of the Xiantian Jinqi present in his body had been depleted. He could not even chop out the fifth blade, and in the worst-case scenario, if Lu Ji had survived the fourth blade attack, then he would have left with no other choice but to chop out the fifth blade. And this fifth blade attack would have contained only the Houtian Jinqi, reducing the attack power significantly. You actually killed him," Zhang Jingxin said in a terrified voice. He was shocked and looked unbelievably at Yi Shiwen, because he had not expected that Yi Shiwen would actually dare to kill Lu Ji. "Do you know who he is?" "I don't care who he is," Yi Shiwen sneered and said. He intended to obstruct this competition, so he got what he deserved. Chapter 60. Chapter 60. The curtain drops. "I don't care who he is," Yi Shiwen sneered. He intended to obstruct this competition, so he got what he deserved. You will die. You have dared to actually kill him," Zhang Jingxin said again and again. There is nothing to say, because he had it coming. At this time, Yi Feng substantially restrained his injuries and said, "That idiot actually dared to enter the Blood Yuan territory and assumed he would be invincible here?" Although Qifeng Mountain's Yiyuan school was only a branch of Yiyuan sect, but underestimating it would be a mistake. Many years ago, Yiyuan school had been established on Qifeng Mountain, and in these several years, it had sent many disciples to study in the main sect. Now, most of these disciples held very high positions, and this showed that Qifeng Mountain's Yiyuan school had a lot of strong backings, and Zhang family's situation was also similar. Otherwise, how could a top-class treasure like Blood Yuan fruit, which could leave any Xiantian master drooling, be monopolized together by Yiyuan school and Zhang family? "Kill them! Kill all of these cheaters!" Yi Feng shouted loudly, which boosted the morale of Yiyuan disciples. And now that Lu Ji had been killed by Yi Shiwen, they were no longer worried. However, Zhang disciples had suddenly lost their morale. "How dare you! Our Zhang family will not let you off!" Zhang Jingxin roared. "Won't let us off? Idiot, it was you Zhang people who conspired to seize all of the Blood Yuan fruits, and also brought this Xiantian master inside the Blood Yuan territory. You have brought this upon yourselves," Yi Feng sneered and said. This time, Zhang family had crossed the line, and by bringing in a Xiantian master, they had also cheated in the competition. Their plan was to massacre the Yiyuan school disciples and blame it on the demon beasts. Also, they had attacked Yiyuan disciples after the competition had officially ended. The explanation for their actions? There was no need for that, because both sides had been hostile towards each other for a long time and were sworn enemies. And the actions of Zhang family had totally agitated the hatred inside the hearts of Yiyuan school disciples. Not to mention, Yiyuan school disciples had a reason to attack, so they didn't need to explain their actions. "Right, kill these bastards! Kill them, leave no one alive!" The disciples of Yiyuan school roared in succession. They had almost walked into the jaws of death, and knew that if Yixuan had not taken care of Lu Ji, then they most likely would have died at the hands of Zhang disciples. Kill these bastards and take revenge for our fellow brothers. Before, many of our Yuan disciples have died at the hands of these bastards, so it's time for payback. Zhang disciples, disperse! Zhang Yuelian quickly shouted. Kill! 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 Zhang disciples had all been exterminated. No one thought that it would actually turn out like this. I did not expect it to become like this, Zhang Yang said with some emotion in his voice. Don't worry, this is a competition and casualties are inevitable. Moreover, this time, they dared to cheat and actually brought a Xiantian disciple inside, Yifeng said. But when Zhang family gets the information about this, they will probably not let us off, Zhang Yang said. Are you afraid of Zhang family? Don't underestimate our Yuan school, Yifeng said while smiling. However, from now on, I am afraid that the title of most powerful top disciple from the younger generation is no longer yours and has been taken away by your younger brother, Zhang Yang said with a genuine smile on his face and looked at Yifeng. Yifeng had been a renowned genius from a younger age, and even if he had been stuck at the peak of Hotian 8th stage for several years, no one could shake his position as the top genius, and once he had a breakthrough, he had already entered half a step into the Xiantian realm. Becoming a full-fledged Xiantian master was only a matter of time. Of course, that's my brother! Yifeng laughed and said as if he did not care. Soon, we will together enter into the main sect, and countless elites from the entire Great Yu state come to study there. We are going to meet many genius evildoers over there, ha ha ha, that is our stage. I have a feeling that when your brother enters into the main sect, he is going to turn the sky and the earth upside down, Zhang Yang said. He is such an evildoer. I heard that he was not this fierce during the inner disciples competition, although he was quite powerful and had also won the championship. But I never thought that he would actually defeat a Xiantian master. Nt Fan Tian Fudi is an idiom and it means sky and the earth turned upside down. Complete confusion. Ha ha ha, well, he is my younger brother after all. Yifeng laughed and seemed very happy. Yixuan did not laugh like Yifeng and was thinking about something else. For him, this fight with Lu Ji was too meaningful, and was not an easy one like his fight with Luo Tian. When Yixuan had killed Luo Tian before, he had already been severely injured by Hua Menghan, so it had become quite easy to behead him. However, the fight this time was different, and it could be counted as Yi Zaiwen's first true battle with the Xiantian master. Even if Lu Ji had only just entered into the Xiantian realm, but he was still a terrifying existence for Hotian realm masters. The Xiantian and Hotian realms were very different in nature, and the way of fighting was also different for the experts of these realms. Yixuan had gained some insights from his battle with a Xiantian master, and he wanted to start practicing as soon as possible, and completely digest the enlightenment he had attained. He believed that after complete digestion, he would be able to condense a total of 20% Xiantian Jinqi. And then, he would be capable of completely beating any master of the Xiantian first stage. Nt. Here, digest is used in the sense of completely comprehend and apply. By that time, Yixuan would be considered to have set foot on path of the true martial way of spiritual practice, and even after entering into the main sect, he would have a high status and wouldn't become someone else's vassal. Nt. Disciples with low cultivation level are treated as slave disciples in the main sect. As for how to exit the Blood Yuan territory, Yixuan was not in a hurry. Since Lu Ji had just entered into the Xiantian realm strength, it was impossible at his meager strength to seal this dimension for too long. He must have used some external means that won't last longer. Anyways, soon the two elders of Yuan school would find out about this abnormal situation, and would immediately open the Blood Yuan territory forcefully. Therefore, Yixuan was not in a hurry, but Yuan school disciples didn't waste any time and immediately rushed to pick off all of the Blood Yuan fruits from the Blood Yuan trees. After all, the most important thing, which had caused all of this bloodshed, was the Blood Yuan fruit, and they were prepared to face even the great Zhang family for the sake of these fruits. Sometime later, in the distant sky, the space began to fluctuate like ripples on the water surface, accompanied with a loud rumbling sound, and in the sky, a huge door opened up and 4 figures jumped in. The first 2 elders to enter the Blood Yuan territory were the short and tall elders of the Zhang family. Even from far, Yishiwen could clearly see the prideful smile on their faces, but after seeing the scene inside the Blood Yuan territory, their complexion immediately turned gloomy. Chapter 61. Chapter 61 Confrontation. The first 2 elders to enter the Blood Yuan territory were the short and tall elders of the Zhang family. Even from far, Yishiwen could clearly see the prideful smile on their faces, but after seeing the scene inside the Blood Yuan territory, their complexion immediately turned gloomy. "How did this happen to the disciples of my Zhang family?" the tall elder said while skimming down from the sky. At this time, his gaze fell on the Yuan school disciples, standing on the ground, and he quickly understood who might have caused all this. He suddenly got furious and shouted, "You little bastards, you actually massacred the people of my Zhang family!" The aura of the tall elder instantly scattered out and spread into the sky. This terrifying, imposing aura was firmly locked onto the Yuan school disciples. Well, the disciples of your Yuan school are simply insane," the short elder roared in an angry voice. "I will kill all of you and bury you all along with my people," the tall elder shouted. "Bastards, you 2 old animals, you want dare to lay your hands on my Yuan school disciples," another loud voice thundered. Both fat and thin elders released their terrifying auras and a murderous look appeared on their faces. "You 2 old bastards are trying to cover for your Yuan school disciples?" the tall elder furiously said. "They massacred the disciples of our Zhang family, so I will kill them all and take revenge," the tall elder said bitterly. "Take a hike!" the thin elder shouted. "Zhang Quan, Zhang Ping, you 2 bastards, don't you dare hurt my Yuan school disciples!" the tall elder Zhang Quan shouted. "I don't care, I want them dead! Get lost!" The fat elder shouted loudly and immediately rushed over to where Yishiwen and Yi Feng were standing and asked, "What on earth happened here?" The fat elder did not expect that things would become this troublesome, although casualties were inevitable in a fierce competition like this. But Zhang disciples had been completely wiped out, which had totally shocked him. The strength of this year's core disciples of Zhang family and Yuan school was about the same. So, the complete destruction of one party at the hands of other was almost impossible. "These Zhang bastards actually." The disciples of Yuan school quickly talked at once and explained what happened in detail. As the fat elder was listening, his face suddenly became livid. The other 3 elders also heard, and suddenly, their complexions also became strange. "So, your Zhang family is the reason behind all of this. You deliberately let a Xiantian master come in. What were you trying to do?" the thin elder snapped. "They actually dared to send a Xiantian master inside the Blood Yuan territory, and also tried to ambush Yuan school disciples, in order to seize all of the Blood Yuan fruits. Their crime is really unforgivable." The thin elder also had a lingering fear, because both elders Zhang Quan and Zhang Ping had become even more furious, and it would be difficult to stop them from hurting the disciples if they used their full strengths. "You will regret it." Zhang Quan gritted his teeth and said, "You will pay the price." "What regret?" "This time, you should regret it because this matter is not over yet, and when the time comes, we will come for you and settle the score." The fat elder sneered. Suddenly, both elders Zhang Quan and Zhang Ping were aggrieved after learning about the heavy losses Zhang family had faced this time. "This is your side of the story, because if we really had sneaked in a Xiantian master, then all of you should be dead by now," Zhang Ping quibbled. "Let me see." Zhang Ping instantly spread out his hand that was surrounded by the rapidly building lingqi, which finally condensed into a giant hand, and instantly shot down towards Yishiwen. Zhang Ping's eyes flashed fiercely and were filled with killing intent, staring at Yishiwen. "How dare you!" Both fat and thin elders yelled at once. The giant hand had instantly come in front of Yishiwen. Yishuan instantly took out the long blade from the scabbard on his back. His long blade shined brightly and a white blade light spread into the sky, then it took the form of a blade and chopped out towards Zhang Ping. "NT blade light is said Daoguang." Boom! A terrifying blade light and the great hand made up of Lingqi severely collided in the air, which filled the entire sky with starlight. Zhang Ping suddenly screamed while holding his hand. A big deep wound had been cut open on his hand, and his blood had started to pour out, that looked like a spring of blood. He had let his guard down for only an instant, but he had still been injured by Yi Zaiwen's Daoqi. Immediately, with a sinister look on his face, his eyes stared firmly at Yishuan. However, he could clearly feel that Yishuan was just a master of the Houtian realm. But how did his attack actually injure a great master of Xiantian realm? His Bladiki clearly contained Xiantian Jinqi, but how could a Houtian realm master possess Xiantian Jinqi? And his Xiantian Jinqi was also powerful enough to injure a senior Xiantian master. But Yishuan clearly was only a warrior of the Houtian realm. Seeing that Yishuan had taken advantage of Zhang Ping's carelessness and had actually inured him, the thin elder suddenly laughed and said, "Zhang Ping, you old fool. You actually got injured by a junior from our Yuan school. You are so pathetic." Zhang Ping bitterly looked at Yishuan, but he knew not to attack again because both fat and thin elders had become cautious. He would probably have to face their thunder attacks if he tried to attack again, although all of the four elders had similar strengths. But Yishuan was an anomaly because Zhang Ping had been unable to figure out the true depth of his strength. The presence of Yishuan had shifted the balance of strength towards the Yuan school's side. After this farce, the four elders didn't doubt anymore and accepted that Yishuan had killed a Xiantian master, but were also quite shocked, because it was truly unbelievable. How could a Xiantian master die at the hands of Yishuan, who was only a master of the Houtian realm? But Yishuan had just showed his incredible prowess by catching off guard and injuring Zhang Ping. Not to mention, Zhang Ping was a superior Xiantian master compared to Lu Ji. At this time, Zhang Quan grinded his teeth and said, "Now we know that Yishuan has killed Lu Ji, so we do not want anything else. As long as you hand over Yishuan to us, we will not pursue this matter anymore." "Get lost!" the fat elder sneered and said. "This time your people were the first to violate the regulations, and you want to punish a disciple of my Yuan school? Don't be so delusional. Just wait till we inform your ancestor about all this. This time you have to hand over Yishuan to us, otherwise our Zhang family won't let you off, because Lu Ji was the disciple of our Tianfeng Palace Hall's great elder," Zhang Quan said. "Did not you hear what I just said? They had dared to conspire for blood yuan fruit. Humph, they really were courting death," the fat elder said. At this time, the space inside the blood yuan territory once again started to fluctuate. NT, I may or may not release Chapter 62 and Chapter 63 today. Chapter 62. Chapter 62 rewards with a violent fluctuation in the space. A person walked out of the door from the sky. Everyone looked at this person and actually saw that it was none other than the ancestor of Yuan's school, Lin Zhantian. Lin Zhantian step by step came down from the sky and walked to the front of Zhang Ping and Zhang Quan, then said, "Go back and tell the master of your family that this matter has not ended yet. Later, I will personally give him a visit and sort this out." Lin Zhantian had easily sorted out this mess. He had clearly proclaimed that this matter was not over yet, and taking Yishuan away was obviously impossible for the Zhang elders. The faces of Zhang Ping and Zhang Quan flushed with anger, but they didn't say anything because they were scared to anger Lin Zhantian. The cultivation level of Lin Zhantian was unfathomable, and no one could ascertain as to how much extent he had cultivated. After the unexpected emergence of Lin Zhantian, all of the Yuan school's disciples felt relieved. They felt completely safe in their hearts because even if the two Zhang elders were to suddenly get mad and attack, nothing bad would happen to them in presence of Lin Zhantian. Everyone had extraordinary confidence in Lin Zhantian, and even Yishuan was no exception. After Lin Zhantian had arrived, Yishiwen had finally relaxed his tightened body a bit. The reputation of Lin Jiantian as the most powerful master of Qifeng Mountain's Yuan school had never wavered for many years. Several years ago, he had arrived here from the main sect, and at that time, the Lord of Zhang family had challenged him to a duel and had lost miserably. Although their duel had been kept secret from public, but people of Yuan school knew about it. After all, it was such an honorable feat only the outer sect disciples did not know. But all of the disciples present here were core disciples, so naturally they knew about it. Lin Jiantian was known as the strongest ancestor to ever come in the history of Yuan school. In the end, no one knew how strong he actually was. Many years ago, he had arrived on the Qifeng Mountain and miserably defeated the master of Zhang family. But this had happened several years ago, and it was hard to make a guess about how much his cultivation would have progressed in these many years. Although Yishiwen couldn't guess the depth of Lin Zhanshan's true cultivation, but just now, when he saw him easily walking high up in the sky, Yishiwen realized that perhaps Lin's strength had already reached a terrifying level. NT, Ling Kong means to be high up in the sky. Even the experts of Xiantian level couldn't easily achieve such a feat of walking high in the sky, and that too in such a relaxed manner. Actual flight was something that only the masters above the Xiantian level could achieve. NT, Xiantian masters couldn't fly as easily as Lin Jiantian could. Lin Jiantian didn't say anything else to Zhang Ping and Zhang Quan and simply arrived to Yi Zaiwen's side with a bit of a smile on his face and said, "Good, this time you have performed wonderfully and didn't lose your father's face." Then, Lin Jiantian, with the crowd of disciples and 2 elders, went straight back to the Yuan school, and all of them returned to the main hall of Yuan school's ancestor. Lin Jiantian looked at the disciples of Yuan school and said, "I learned about the things that happened there in Blood Yuan territory, but your scores are still valid, and now, the winners will be selected based on these scores. The top 3 can each win a Blood Yuan fruit and a Xiantian pellet as the rewards. The rest can also have the rewards prepared for you." Yishiwen was dumbstruck. He knew that the first 3 were going to receive a Blood Yuan fruit each. But, regarding Xiantian pellet, Lin Jiantian had just added it as the reward for the top scorers, and was definitely a compensation for the incidents that took place in Blood Yuan territory. But he already had a Xiantian pellet, so getting another was not too meaningful to him. Lin Jiantian had come up with 3 Xiantian pellets so easily, but Yishiwen did not feel strange about this matter. After all, he was the ancestor of Qifeng Mountain Yuan school, and he also had the backing of main sect. There were a lot of masters of Xiantian level or more studying at the main sect, so giving out 3 Xiantian pellets at once was not something impossible. Soon, the scores had been calculated. Yishiwen had scored the highest score of 19,000 points. Yifeng got the second best score of 6,500 points, and Zhang Yang got the third best score of 5,300 points. Yi Rixue was ranked 12th, which was quite a surprising for Yishiwen. Even if she had participated in this competition with a lot of Hotian 9th stage masters, she had still managed to get a good enough rank. However, according to Yi Zaiwen's observation, it was only a matter of time before she would actually break through to the Hotian 9th stage. They were going to enter into the main sect after 3 months. These 3 months were enough for Yi Rixue to break into the Hotian 9th stage, and even improve a lot. She was only 20 years old, and a year older than Yishiwen, but had already practiced to this extent, and this proved that her talent was not inferior to Yifeng. NT. I had written 2 years older than Yishiwen, which was a typo, and it actually should be 20 years old and 1 year older than Yishiwen. Yi Zaiwen's cultivation pace was very fast because he was relying on special space. Without it, his talent was not at all comparable to his 2 older siblings. Yishiwen had already made up his mind that he would give the extra Xiantian pellet that he had to Yi Rixue, because he did not need 2 Xiantian pellets. With the help of Xiantian pellet, and her natural talent, the future progress of her cultivation would be incredibly fast. As the top scorer, Yishiwen was the first to receive the rewards. A Blood Yuan fruit, a Xiantian pellet, 50,000 low-grade spirit stones, and an opportunity to learn a Xiantian power technique, as well as a large number of medicinal pills. The rewards he had got were far more than what he had expected. Now, Yi Shiwen did not need to worry about shortage of spirit stones in the near future, and could easily practice for long intervals inside the special space. The most important thing was that the blood yuan fruit was something even the Xiantian masters were envious of. Only 9 fruits matured in a period of 100 years, and even Xiantian masters had to spend half of their lives waiting. The value of a blood yuan fruit was immense in the eyes of Xiantian masters, because, as long as they were in the Xiantian realm, eating a blood yuan fruit would be able to immediately enhance their cultivation, regardless of which stage they were on. Although a blood yuan fruit was not of any use to the masters above the Xiantian realm, however, it was very beneficial to become the Jindao master of Xiantian realm. But then why had it not been taken away from the hands of Qifeng Mountain's Yuan school and Zhang family in all these years? Although Xiantian pellets weren't rare inside the Yuan school, but there was no doubt that it was very precious. A Xiantian pellet didn't have any side effects and would not affect the future cultivation of the expert. This was the reason why this pellet was so well known, but unfortunately it was only useful to promote an expert at the peak of Hotian 9th stage to the Xiantian realm. NT, I won't make any promises, but you may expect chapter 63 in few hours, tongue sticking out. A few months later, several geniuses from the Great Yu State would gather at one place and practice together. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but feel excited about this. According to the news I received, a lot of sub-schools are sending Xiantian masters to enter into the main sect, Lin Zhantian said. This time, they have trained some peerless geniuses, and main sect is going to get flooded with many geniuses. That is the reason why I had agreed to Zhang family's proposal to have the core disciples competition in the Blood Yuan territory so that you all can have some life and death battle experiences and benefit from it. Xiantian Master. All 3 of them were shocked to hear that. Yi Feng and Zhang Yang were at the peak of Hotian 9th, and Yi Feng had also entered half a step into the Xiantian realm, so they naturally knew more than anyone that how much difficult it actually was to break into the Xiantian realm. And even after entering half a step into the Xiantian realm, Yi Feng would still need to prepare because there would be a lot of stronger people studying in the main sect. Although, after entering into the main sect, they would be able to quickly advance to the Xiantian realm. But thanks to the main sect before or after entering into the Xiantian nature or a great difference. Although Yi Shiwen was not at peak of Hotian 9th stage, but his fighting power could be compared with a Xiantian master, and after fighting and defeating one, he had finally understood what sort of power and presence a Xiantian master held in the world of martial arts. No wonder Lin Zhantian had given them such generous rewards. Right now, you 3 have the chance to enter into the Xiantian realm in a short span of time, and therefore, I decided to give Xiantian pellets to all of you. In the next few months, when you must have to try your best and completely break through to the Xiantian realm, and at that time, these Xiantian pellets would help you to safely enter into the Xiantian realm, Lin Zhantian said without hiding anything. Competition was present everywhere. There was a competition between Zhang family and Yuan school, but it was just a competition between 2 sub-schools. Qifeng Mountain's Yuan school was one of the patrons of main sect, and so, it also had a lot of rival schools, and they also used to send disciples to study in main sect. The disciples of these rival schools would always have violent fights after entering into the main sect. Each of you can also choose a Xiantian level power technique, Lin Zhantian said, and it was clear that his plan all along was to help them in rapidly enhancing their strengths in a short time. Yes. 3 of them nodded together, and they also knew that after entering into the main sect, things won't be so peaceful over there. Good, I have told you everything, now quickly go and choose a Xiantian power technique, Lin Zhantian said. The contest between several sub-schools actually included the contest among the top geniuses representing their sub-schools, and the overall strength of the current year's batch. Yi Shiwen and other 2 didn't wait and began to choose a Xiantian powerful technique. Some of these techniques were powerful and some were weak, but all of them were top-class Xiantian power techniques, and ranking them was very difficult. Thunder and lightning chain spear! Floating cotton blade! Yi Shiwen looked at the Xiantian's secret books one after another, but he couldn't find a suitable one for him. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen caught a glimpse of a bit older secret book, quietly lying in the corner. Coiling Dragon Palm. These 3 large characters, printed on its cover, came into the sight of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen then walked over to the corner and picked up that old secret book. He slowly opened its first page, but suddenly, a loud shout from Lin Zhantian entered his ears. "Don't open the book!" But Yi Shiwen had already opened it. Boom! Yi Shiwen suddenly heard a loud roar of a gigantic dragon, and a scary thought instantly break into his mind. Suddenly, a huge figure of a person appeared inside Yi Shiwen's mind. This figure was fuzzy and didn't seem real, but suddenly, the figure shot out its palm, and a gigantic blue dragon ascended into the sky. It looked up towards the sky and roared loudly, while its powerful claws fiercely grabbed the blue dome of heaven, which seemed to crack under its tremendous strength. Nt. Tsang Qiong is an idiom which means the blue dome of heaven. Yi Shiwen simply felt that his entire mind would get ripped apart by this gigantic blue dragon, and his psyche would collapse. Each time the giant palm shot, it seemed to contain the divine providence itself, and brandished a gigantic dragon. By this time, a flock of gigantic dragons were soaring in the sky. Yi Shiwen felt as if his mind would collapse any time. Then, suddenly, within his mind, a burst of intermittent colorful lights appeared inside the mysterious space and completely absorbed all of these scary thoughts. Yi Shiwen slowly opened his eyes while panting heavily and covered in cold sweat. "Are you all right?" Lin Zhantian immediately arrived in front of Yi Shiwen and asked in a worried tone. "It's nothing, I am all right," Yi Shiwen said with a burst of lingering fear. Dash. Chapter 64. Chapter 64. Rapid advancement in cultivation. Yi Shiwen was sweating heavily after that scary thought had attacked his consciousness and had almost destroyed his mind. This was quite a terrifying experience for him. "Are you all right, little brother?" Yi Feng asked in a worried voice because he did not know what exactly had happened to Yi Shiwen. He just saw Lin Zhantian shouting and suddenly rushing towards Yi Shiwen, who was drenched in sweat and looked terrified at that moment. "It's nothing, I am all right," Yi Shiwen said in a calm voice. However, that vivid thought had firmly imprinted itself into his mind, and it had become impossible for him to forget it. "Blame me," Lin Zhantian said. "I did not warn you in time, but you cannot read this secret book of Coiling Dragon Palm." "Why?" Yi Shiwen asked. "A long time ago, our forefathers had brought back this Coiling Dragon Palm power technique from the ruins of a suspected ancient martial arts era," Lin Zhantian slowly explained. "Ancient martial arts era!" all of the 3 disciples exclaimed at once. In ancient times, there existed an extremely glorious martial arts civilization, and now, only a few bits and pieces of that era had remained. The once glorious era of martial arts had now just turned into a legend. "Yes, this power technique comes from the ancient martial arts era, but after obtaining it from the ruins, no one could actually learn it, because this type of martial arts technique is inherited and learned through thoughts, and no one could withstand the immensity of that thought," Lin Zhantian explained. "It contains a mighty writing, and the method to learn this technique is hidden as a thought between the lines. Long ago, a lot of our ancestors had tried to inherit this martial arts technique, but in the end, the thought present inside this secret book had destroyed their souls and killed them. After a long time, no one paid attention to it anymore, and it finally fell into my hands. I brought it here, but due to a temporary oversight, I was distracted and forgot to warn you kids about it. Fortunately, all 3 of you are all right." Yi Shiwen had a burst of lingering fear, because just now, his soul might have been torn apart by that terrifying thought and his mind would have completely collapsed. If this thought had not been sucked inside the mysterious space, then he would definitely have faced a mental breakdown and death by now. The thought was really too frightening, and no one knew who had created or passed down this incredible martial arts technique. But it contained just handwritten text, then how could it actually contain such a terrifying thought? Hidden among the text, and even the passage of innumerable years couldn't erase it. From this, one could easily infer the incredible prowess of the creator of this book. You can't learn this martial arts technique. You absolutely cannot, so give it up, Lin Jiantian said. Yi Shiwen nodded and didn't argue with Lin Jiantian, but he also knew that the terrifying thought had been absorbed into the mysterious space. Later, if he wanted to take a look at it, he could do it any time, so he didn't need to argue over something that he had already acquired. Yi Shiwen kept the secret book of coiling dragon palm on the shelf, and chose another power technique called restraining breath technique. Although a lot of power techniques, more or less, mentioned about how to hide one's breath. However, this power technique specialized in the field, not to mention, it was also a Xiantian level technique. NT. Hiding breath means to hide one's cultivation level. Others were surprised because they couldn't understand why Yi Shiwen had not chosen an attack-type Xiantian power technique, but rather, he chose such a technique that would be useless for fighting. However, they did not know that Yi Shiwen had already learned many fighting-based Xiantian level power techniques, and if he was to choose one more, it would be equivalent to biting off more than he could chew. After each of the three winners had chosen a power technique, the core disciples' competition had finally come to an end, and whole Yuan school had become noisy, talking about the recent incidents. The news of Zhang family sending a Xiantian master inside the Blood Yuan territory, to massacre the Yuan school disciples and seize all of the Blood Yuan fruits, had spread throughout the school, but no one would have thought that this Xiantian master had been killed instead, along with all of the other Zhang core disciples. Overnight, the news spread in the Yuan school like a forest fire, and the headline clearly referred to Yi Ziwen's exploits, and how he had single-handedly beheaded a Xiantian disciple. Now, everyone knew that Yi Shiwen had actually beheaded a Xiantian disciple of Zhang family. In a short period of time, Yi Ziwen's reputation had incredibly surpassed that of those established top disciples of previous years, and many disciples had started to recognize him as the strongest top core disciple. However, when there was uproar in the outside world, and everyone was talking about the exploits of Yi Shiwen, but he seemed to have vanished, and no one could find him. After choosing a Xiantian power technique, Yi Shiwen didn't waste time and shut himself up to start the closed-door practice. He was going to the main sect after 3 months, so while he still had time, each second of it was valuable for practicing, because he needed to be strong enough to sustain himself among the geniuses who were also going to enroll with Yi Shiwen. After entering into the main sect, the competition would be even more intense. In a blink of an eye, a month's time had already passed. In the backside of Qifeng Mountain, the intermittent loud roars of a dragon could be heard echoing in the sky. Yi Shiwen had a calm expression on his face, and suddenly, his palm shot out, and a figure, with its hands clasped together, leaped inside the mountain forest using dragon tiger steps. Boom! With a loud sound, a large tree instantly collapsed by a forceful slap of Yi Ziwen's palm using coiling dragon palm. Yi Shiwen stopped his movements, and calculated the time and found out that he had been practicing over a month. In just a month, his strength had progressed by leaps and bounds. His cultivation had reached all the way to the peak of Hotian 9th stage, and was only one step away from entering into the Xiantian realm. He had also condensed 20% of his Jinqi into Xiantian Jinqi, and his strength had directly reached the strength of 3 dragons, which was even comparable to the strength of a Xiantian 2nd stage master. Now Yi Shiwen had become powerful enough to easily defeat a Xiantian expert like Lu Ji, in few moves only. Also, during this month, Yi Shiwen had gained the most progress in his martial arts techniques, and for that, he had to burn a large number of spirit stones to advance his martial arts skills faster in a short span of time. The first was Missing Moon Beheader. After a month of crazy practicing, he had finally succeeded to reach the Desheng realm, and now, he could strike 9 consecutive blades one after the other, which was big feat even for a Xiantian master. And chopping 9 consecutive blades was the dead end for Missing Moon Beheader, but with the strike of each additional blade, the total might of the attack would also increase significantly, and after 9 consecutive blade strikes, one could imagine the terrifying might present in the 9th blade. After a month of continuously burning the spirit stones, his celestial step technique had also reached the next level. Initially, this technique was incomplete and could only be regarded as an advanced technique. At that time, Yishuan had practiced it to the Desheng realm, but later, inside the special space, he completely deduced the missing Xiantian realm parts of celestial step. Although he had merely mastered the first glimpse of Xiantian realm parts, but now, his speed had increased by more than 50% of what it used to be. It could be said that his speed had increased to a terrifying level. While practicing Tyrant Body technique, he had finally reached the peak of Xiaoqing realm, and was only one step away from entering into the Desheng realm, and once he did, his physical strength would grow rapidly. Lastly, he had completely practiced restraining breath technique to its highest possible level. Chapter 65. Chapter 65. Departure. After completely mastering the restraining breath technique, now, even if he stood next to a master of the peak Hotian 9th stage, his breath would not be discovered. And so long as he was careful enough, he had full confidence to pull a fast one on a Xiantian master. Yishuan also discovered that the utility of restraining breath technique was far more than just restraining the breath. It could even change the breath of the practitioner completely into another person's breath, which was very rare. This technique could manipulate the cultivation level. He had spent a lot of time on practicing coiling dragon palm and had also burnt a large number of spirit stones so that he could continue to stay inside the special space present in his mind. That scary thought had been absorbed by the special space, and now, he could practice coiling dragon palm as and when he wished to do so, because inside that mysterious space, he did not need to be worried about that scary thought going berserk inside his mind. So long as he had time and enough spirit stones, Yishuan could observe and emulate this coiling dragon palm technique, but it was too subtle and his cultivation level was too low to be able to fully comprehend it. After a month of continuous burning of spirit stones, he had begun to comprehend only a section of that thought, and had learnt the first move of coiling dragon palm, named Hidden Dragon Rising from the Abyss. The power present in the move, Hidden Dragon Rising from the Abyss, was tremendous, but it came at a major cost, because once used, it would consume 10% of the Xiantian Jinqi instantly. This month, the strength of Yishuan had progressed extremely fast, enough to surpass the rate of consumption of spirit stones. In just a month, to practice inside the special space, he had consumed more than 50,000 spirit stones, which was more than half of his total stock of spirit stones. Although he had not yet entered into the Xiantian realm, but now, he was confident enough to beat any master of the Xiantian first stage, and he could even compete with the masters of Xiantian's second stage, and could easily exchange blows with them. After continuously practicing for a month, Yishuan did not continue to stay in the backside of Qifeng Mountain and returned to the Yiyuan school. What? You are going to walk alone to the main sect? At the Yi family's residence, the members of Yi family were sitting on a dinner table, and suddenly, Xia Chunxue exclaimed. With a puzzled expression on his face, Yi Kongming looked at Yishuan, because he couldn't understand why Yishuan had planned to walk all the way to the main sect. Do you know how long it takes to walk from Qifeng Mountain to main sect? Xia Chunxue asked. At least more than 2 months if you walk at a moderate pace. I know, but my cultivation has reached a bottleneck, and I think that walking all the way to the main sect would turn out to be a good training for me, Yishuan said. Generally, main sect would always send giant demon birds to serve as mounts for the disciples. These flying mounts were not uncommon in the main sect, especially for those Xiantian masters, who were unable to fly, and these demon birds acted as their mounts to fly in the sky. There were a variety of mounts available, such as to fly in the sky, to run on the ground, and to swim in the water. These flying demon birds also served as a communication link between the Qifeng Mountain and the main sect. Therefore, although they were going to enter into the main sect in just 3 months, But Yi Feng and other core disciples were not anxious and were quietly waiting for the people from main sect to come and pick them up. Yi Kongming looked at Yishu and then turned his face towards Xia Chunxue and said, "If he wants to go alone, then let him go. He will gain a lot of experience from this journey, and he will also get a chance to learn about the local customs, which will be quite beneficial for his future practice. But going by the road can be dangerous," Xia Chunxue said in a worried voice. "Kids need to have their own adventures because you can't expect a circus tiger to hunt in a wild forest. Wenner is not a kid anymore, and we can't protect him for a lifetime," Yi Kongming said. "Well, but you have to be very careful on the way," Xia Chunxue said. "And I will." Yi Xuan nodded, and then he took out a porcelain vase from his bosom and said, "This is a Xiantian pellet. When the time comes, please give it to sister for me." At that time, both Yi Feng and Yi Rixue were doing closed-door practice in order to have a breakthrough before heading for the main sect. "Isn't this Xiantian pellet yours? How can you give it your sister?" Xia Chunxue immediately said. "What will you use?" "Rest assured, I have 2 Xiantian pellets," Yi Xuan said, and he knew that it was very difficult for them to believe him, so he took out the other Xiantian pellet in front of them. "Then it's all right," Xia Chunxue had to agree. Both Xia Chunxue and Yi Kongming were considerate enough to not ask about the source of this second Xiantian pellet. At that time, they were both glad for Yi Rixue, because now, with the help of a Xiantian pellet, she would be able to safely enter into the Xiantian realm. They were very happy, because all of their children loved as well as supported each other. The 3 siblings would support each other after entering into the main sect. Just knowing this much was enough for Yi Kongming and Xia Chunxue, and they couldn't ask for anything more. They just wanted their children to lead happy and peaceful lives. When Xia Chunxue accepted the Xiantian pellet for Yi Rixue, a genuine smile appeared on Yi Xuan's face. After coming to this world, he had lost all of his previous relationships. His loved ones had been left behind in the previous world, and now, everything related to his original world existed only in his memories. So, the existence of Yi family worked as a mental support for him, and he was genuinely happy to be of some help to them. After coming to this world, Yi Xuan had totally freaked out when he noticed that he possessed memories of 2 persons. In order to get rid of this confused mental state, he had decided to create a new identity for him in this new life and world. And he cared a lot for his family members and could do anything for their sake. Yi Zaiwen's decision to walk alone all the way to the main sect had caused a huge buzz in the Yi Yuan school because he was not an ordinary disciple, but was a rare talent of Yi Yuan school because he had become the strongest top core disciple after killing a Xiantian master. He had become the ace of Qingfeng Mountain's Yi Yuan school, and if he would walk alone to the main sect, then everyone feared that he might face an accident on the way. Moreover, Yi Yuan school had many enemies, including Zhang family, and they could pose a threat to his life. However, the principle of this world was might is right. While executives did not quite agree to his decision, but Yi Xuan didn't care about their stand and had already decided that, next morning, after packing his things, he would leave Qingfeng Mountain and walk towards the main sect. Yi Xuan gawked and never thought to hear about such a rare treasure in a small town like this. He had read in many records that it grew only in the extremely high-temperature environment of magma. Of course, there were many benefits one could get by consuming this flower. It could transform the mortal body into a fire spirit, and then, one could practice fire attribute power techniques, which was quite rare. But why recruit warriors for that? Yi Xuan asked this question because who wouldn't want to hog such a rare treasure? Good question, sir, because a monster lives inside the magma pool to guard the treasure. When the waiter said monster, he could not help but shiver a bit. And that ferocious monster has already killed several scout warriors. So there is such a thing. Yi Xuan frowned, but a demon beast guarding a rare treasure was a very normal thing. But this was obviously not a general demon beast, otherwise, it would not have made such uproar. What do you know about that monster? Yi Xuan asked. All I know is that Chow family is now recruiting warriors who can slay this monster, and if you are interested, you may enlist your name as well," the waiter said. "It would be nice if you killed that monster, because Magma Pool is not far away from the town, and the monster would frequently visit here, and has also killed people from the Chow family." Originally, Yishiwen just wanted to take a rest in this small town, but now he had become very interested in that blue flaming flower, and decided to wait and see what would happen in the end. After about a minute had passed and the inn slowly began to get crowded, and almost all of the rooms had been booked in no time. Yishiwen also booked a room, then slowly sat down on a seat and began to eat and drink together. In the last 2 days he didn't get a chance to have a relaxed dinner like this. Then, suddenly, Yishiwen noticed a tower-like large man entering inside the inn. He glanced around and saw that all the seats were occupied, and right then, he saw Yishiwen sitting by the window. He strode to the front of Yishiwen and said in a low, muffled voice, "Boy, step aside and quickly get lost, and grandfather will spare your life." NT, to speak in a low, muffled voice is an idiom. Get lost! Yishiwen did not turn his head, but shouted loudly. Only the strong commanded respect in this world which followed the principle of might is right. Yishiwen looked weak compared to that burly man that had resulted into this situation. "What did you say, you little bastard?" The brawny man suddenly stared at Yishiwen with his big eyes, and his big hand instantly shot towards Yishiwen. Bang! Yishiwen slammed his palm on the table, and suddenly, a chopstick flew up from the table. Yishiwen struck the chopstick with his palm using the coiling dragon palm power technique. Phew! The chopstick exuded a sharp piercing sound and flew with a lightning speed towards the big hand of that brawny guy. Ah! The brawny guy screamed in a loud voice when the chopstick pierced right through his palm with a terrifying force and sent his body flying. That severely hit on the wall, and his hand got firmly nailed on the wall by that chopstick. The brawny guy was endlessly wailing while his hand was nailed on the wall, but from Yishiwen's demeanor, it seemed as if nothing had happened at all. He took out a new set of chopsticks from the box and started eating once again. Yishiwen knew, at this time, there must be numerous people staring at him. These were the rebellious warriors and desperados. However, they had not entered into the Xiantian realm, so Yishiwen simply did not care about them. But this could be troublesome for him because the rumors about the blue flaming flower, and the enlisting of warriors for subduing the monster, had attracted a lot of strong masters to arrive at this small town, and Yishiwen did not want to have a high profile. Now that Yishiwen had effortlessly defeated that noisy, burly guy in front of everyone, he could feel several gazes looking maliciously at him. Ha ha ha, this young brother's got some fine skills. NT, I will upload chapter 67 in few hours. Chapter 67. Chapter 67 Monster. Ha ha ha, this young brother's got some fine skills. The sound of footsteps came from the upstairs, and Yishiwen saw a youth wearing embroidered clothes coming down the stairs while laughing heartily. I did not expect to actually be able to see such a skilled master here, it's so unexpected. The youth wearing embroidered clothes did not even look at that wailing brawny who was still conscious and had luckily not died. Yishiwen had a surprised look in his eyes. This youth had actually concealed his breath, but after practicing restraining breath technique, Yishiwen had become particularly sensitive, and immediately found out that this youth was actually a great master of the Xiantian realm. He walked up to the front of Yishiwen and introduced himself. Hello, my name is Dai Xiaohua, nice to meet you, what's your name, brother? NT, Dai Xiaohua means wearing small flowers. Dai Xiaohua? Yishiwen twitched his eyebrows. A big man like him was actually called wearing small flowers. Well, he seemed like an ignorant person to Yishiwen, but he apparently did not feel anything about introducing himself as wearing small flowers, or maybe he had gotten used to it. My name is Yishiwen, Yishiwen said, and he already knew that this youth was not malicious. After learning the restraining breath technique, Yishiwen's understanding of other person's breath had progressed by leaps and bounds. It not only could restrain and change the breath, but could also tell whether a person was hostile or not, based on his breath. One could easily disguise the facial expressions, but breath was the only thing that one could never disguise. Ha ha, after looking for so long, I finally found a decent master. Dai Xiaohua smiled and said, unlike these motley crew. Dai Xiaohua was obviously talking about the warriors sitting in the inn, but surprisingly, although these warriors had angry looks on their faces, but they suppressed their anger and did not say anything. This made Yishuan somewhat curious about Dai Xiaohua. There was a huge difference of martial arts heritage between these warriors and Yishuan. They were simply a group of outlaws, and their daily jobs involved struggles between life and death. This had turned them into hot-tempered and irritable people. But they still didn't say any word on Dai Xiaohua's sarcastic comment. Not of all these warriors were in the Hotian realm, and there were some very strong masters among them, including some who had surpassed the Hotian realm. As if Dai Xiaohua had seen through Yi Zaiwen's curiosity, he laughed and said, "It's nothing. These people do not acknowledge logic but strength. Since they cannot defeat me, they can only endure." This straightforward reply from Dai Xiaohua left a good and deep impression on Yishuan, and this frank youth was far better than those other warriors. "Brother Yi, are you going to enlist yourself as the brave warrior of Chao family?" Almost instantaneously, Yishuan took out his long blade from the scabbard on his back and chopped out a dazzling blade light towards the huge head. Dang! The blade light chopped on the giant head and unexpectedly produced a metal clashing sound. The sharp blade light drew a white mark on that giant head, but the monster was frightened from this sudden attack from Yishuan, and suddenly jumped back. Yishuan finally got a look at this giant head. He actually saw a 10-feet-high beast with its 4 claws dug into the ground, covered with numerous red and black-colored dense scales and suffused with a breathtaking coldness with a slight tinct of fiery brightness. A terrifying aura firmly locked on Yishuan, but he didn't wait and instantly chopped out a huge crescent bladiki towards that monster. At this time, the warriors present in the nearby locations finally discovered the monster, and started to shout loudly to warn everyone. "Monster! Monster!" Chapter 68. Chapter 68 Fire-Lin Beast. "Monster! Monster is here!" Someone shouted crazily, and suddenly the whole Kaojiaji town shook with numerous warriors rushing out with torches in their hands. But this monster was ridiculously strong. Although Yi Zaiwen's blade attack was hasty, but it was still powerful enough to bisect a master of peak Hotian 9th stage. However, it still couldn't break the defense of the monster, and could only put a scratch on its scales. Yi Zaiwen's sudden attack had scared it, and it had jumped back and ran away, because the warriors from Chao family had also started to arrive at the scene. Many warriors started to pursue after that monster, but it was too fast and fled in a blink of an eye. However, during its escape, several warriors had been caught off guard and were torn apart by that monster. No one was able to stop this monster. "Hugh!" Suddenly, a loud shout spread over and Dai Xiaohua's figure flew down from a nearby roof. "100 stages God Fist!" Dai Xiaohua blasted a punch with a terrifying strength which instantly vibrated the air and rushed after the monster. Boom! The massive strength present in Dai Xiaohua's attack directly crashed into the monster's body. Bang! The scales on the body of the monster immediately shattered. Dai Xiaohua's attack undoubtedly showed a completely different strength thanks to the condensed Jin Qi of a Xiantian 2nd stage master. The monster was in a severe pain inflicted by this attack and wanted to stop and wreak havoc on the perpetrators, but it knew that Dai Xiaohua was not someone it could easily take on. It immediately picked up speed and, taking advantage of the dark night sky, it immediately fled away. It looked as if a red and black flame was passing gently but also swiftly across the sky. Dai Xiaohua chased after it, but after a while, it had started to slowly pull away and leave him behind. He was tyrannically powerful compared to this monster, especially his fist technique was incredibly powerful, but that was not the case with his agility skill. Although, he had practiced a very powerful agility technique, but it had showed its inferiority at this critical time. The so-called law of biting off more than one could chew. Dai Xiaohua had practiced a very powerful Xiantian level fist technique to a profound realm, and he had spent most of his time on practicing 100 stages God Fist, and by spending less time on practicing his agility technique, his agility skill had become inferior. Also, the speed of this monster was at a terrifying level and most people could only see red and black shadows flying at an insane speed. Dai Xiaohua bitterly stopped. Unfortunately, at that time, he was far away from the monster, otherwise he had the confidence of stopping it. At this time, all of a sudden, accompanied with a gust of wind and a sharp whistling sound, a blurred figure instantly crossed Dai Xiaohua and chased after the monster. Dai Xiaohua immediately recognized that this figure undoubtedly belonged to Yishiwen, whose stature was smoothly and elegantly traversing while constantly flashing towards that monster. Dai Xiaohua could not help but be secretly surprised at Yi Zaiwen's amazing agility skill. Biting off more than one could chew was only a truth for other people, but this logic didn't apply on Yishiwen, because even geniuses needed several years to completely master a martial art. But what about Yishiwen? For Yishiwen, so long as there were enough spirit stones, he would be able to fully master any martial arts in a very short amount of time. This was the reason why both his blade and agility skills were exceptionally strong. After only a few minutes of pursuit, Yishiwen had already left Kaojiaji town behind, and while chasing after the monster, he had finally entered the mountain forest. "Don't run away like a coward! Stay behind and fight with me!" Yishiwen shouted, and his blade chopped out a bright blade light which shone like a faint moonlight and instantly illuminated the entire forest, while rushing towards the monster. Roar! The monster was anxious, and with a loud roar, its stature transversely shifted sideways with an incredible speed and dodged Yi Zaiwen's Daoqi. The monster turned around and stared fiercely at Yishiwen. Its two lantern-sized eyes flashed ominously, and were firmly locked on Yishiwen. Then it lifted its face up towards the sky and roared loudly. An ominous aura started to overflow from its body and openly disseminate everywhere. Yishiwen noticed that it was actually a Xiantian-level demon beast, and he didn't know about its species. The monster opened its big mouth, blowing a foul smell on Yi Zaiwen's face, followed by a surge of blue flames coming out of its mouth that instantly burned through the air and soared towards Yishiwen to sear him. Whoosh! Yishiwen suddenly jumped up high in the sky, directly over the monster, and easily dodged those blue flames. Roar! The monster raised its head and opened up its big mouth to bite. "You are courting death!" Yi Zaiwen's long blade instantly chopped out a dazzling blade light that looked as if the stars were falling from the sky, and it severely cut into the body of that monster. Missing Moon Beheader! The strength of 3 dragons completely unleashed, and Yi Zaiwen's total strength surpassed the terrifying force of 10,000 jin and instantly concentrated on a single point of attack. NT 1 jin equals 0, 5 kg. Bang! With the sound of metal clashing, Yi Zaiwen's blade attack, containing massive strength of 3 dragons, directly clashed into the monster's body and sent it rolling down on the ground, but it immediately stood up the very next instant. Yishiwen was flabbergasted because the defensive strength of its scales was unbelievably terrifying. Demon beasts generally held the advantage of possessing tough bodies compared to humans, but this extent of toughness was definitely rare. Yi Zaiwen's most powerful blade attack, endowed with the strength of 3 dragons, had actually just chipped a few pieces of the scales on its body. It could be said that this monster had the strongest defense among all of the demon beasts that Yishiwen had seen so far in his lifetime. It was such a terrifying demon beast that even attacks from a master of the Xiantian first stage couldn't break its defense, and this was the reason why Chao family could only leave this monster running amok. Yishiwen had also tried out its strength and confirmed that it had already reached the peak of Xiantian first stage, and even a master of peak Xiantian first stage was not its match, and would only die if tried to fight with it head-on. The strength of this monster was comparable to that of a master of Xiantian's second stage. So, even an anomaly like Yishiwen, whose strength was equivalent to that of a master of Xiantian's second stage, could only fight with it on equal terms. However, it was impossible for him to defeat it at his current strength. After taking an attack from Yi Zaiwen's blade, the monster suffered small injuries and was in pain. It had realized that dealing with Yi Shiwen would not be easy. The explosive strength in its limbs burst out, and it suddenly leaped up and dashed into the mountain forest at an insane speed. It had actually become even faster than before. Yi Shiwen couldn't reach its insane speed, and could only give up. Yi Shiwen walked back along the same route. At this time, Kaojiaji town was already brightly lit, because the sudden attack of monster had alerted everyone and people could be seen walking around inside the small town. Many people had gathered at the entrance of Chao family's manor, and a lot more had rushed there to see Yi Shiwen and had already encircled him. "Brother Yi, what happened? Did you catch up to that monster?" Dai Shaohua asked. "No, it got away." Yi Shiwen did not want to reveal too many details of his fight with the monster. "It's a pity because that was actually a fire Lin beast. I did not expect to actually see a fire Lin beast here," Dai Shaohua said. NT, Chapter 69 in few hours. Chapter 69. Chapter 69 Strange. "It's a pity because that was definitely the fire Lin beast. I actually did not expect to see a fire Lin beast here," Dai Shaohua said. NT Lin means unicorn. Fire Lin beast, that monster was a fire Lin beast? No wonder my attacks didn't work on it. Its scales are way too hard, and I think even those famous precious armors are nothing in comparison. If only I could get those scales to make armor out of them, then I won't have to fear for my safety anymore. Those warriors were excited and still discussing about how Fire Lin Beast had been unable to wreak havoc like earlier, and had been easily driven out this time. But right now, Yi Shiwen was recalling the information he had about Fire Lin Beast in his mind. Fire Lin Beast was a very famous and unique type of demon beast that would take birth in a magma pool and could only survive an extremely hot place during its birth. There were rumors that Fire Lin Beast contained the blood of ancient Fire Qilin Beast in its body, but this was only a rumor, and no one knew whether this was true or false. After all, like dragons, unicorns were also only a legend. NT, Qilin is the name for a mythical Chinese unicorn, just like wyverns, Filong, were an inferior species of ancient dragons. Yuron, Fire Lin Beast was rumored to be an inferior species of ancient Fire Qilin species and contained their blood. Adults of Fire Lin Beast species were able to surpass the Xiantian realm, so it could be deduced from its cultivation level that the said monster of Kaojiaji town, that was outrageously powerful and had been wreaking havoc for all this time, was actually not an adult Fire Lin Beast, and perhaps had taken birth not long ago. Directly born with its cultivation level in the Xiantian realm? Yi Shiwen had mixed feelings after hearing this and sighed, because with respect to these unique demon beasts, the human race was really weak. Except for the wisdom, there was nothing else which could support the fact that humans were stronger than these unique beasts. But even so, humans still occupied the major areas of Jinwujia world and were also its true leaders. Today, I would like to thank all of you for your efforts. Because of your presence here, we were able to scare away that Fire Lin Beast, and this incident did not end up in a tragedy. At this time, a handsome middle-aged man came out from the Chao family's mansion and said while cupping one hand into the other across the chest, "Lord is so polite. There is no need to stand on ceremonies, it's our job." This man was actually the Lord of Chao family, named Chao Jinbia. Anyway, today, our Chao family escaped unharmed and the credit for that goes to all of you, so, I will personally make sure to generously reward each and every one of you, Chao Jinbiao said. Tomorrow, our Chao family will start an operation to eliminate that Fire Lin Beast, and I wish for all of you to join us in this operation. Chao Jinbiao said. No problem. Of course, we will participate in this operation. Many warriors laughed and immediately accepted the proposal of Chao Jinbiao to go and eliminate the Fire Lin Beast. The beast had been driven away so easily and this had increased their confidence, after all, even though a few people had died, but the Fire Lin beast had to actually flee for its life. Furthermore, a mere Hotian realm expert like Yi Shiwen had been able to chase after it and driven it away. However, Yi Shiwen was not so optimistic, because just now, he actually sensed that the cultivation level of Chao Jinbiao was already in the Xiantian realm. Although, he had camouflaged his breath quite well, but he had accidentally leaked a very small amount of his breath, and that had been instantly sensed by Yi Shiwen. NT, think of breath like an aura which is directly proportional to one's cultivation level. After practicing the restraining breath technique, Yi Shiwen had become very sensitive to the aura of other people, and by virtue of a person's aura, he had been able to sense their cultivation level and strength. And Chao Jinbiao turned out to be a Xiantian master, but he seemed injured, because his aura was very unstable when Yi Shiwen had sensed it. But even a wounded Xiantian master like Chao Jinbiao would not be unable to retaliate if a Fire Lin beast was wreaking havoc and killing members of his family. Moreover, this Fire Lin beast had particularly attacked the members of Chao family in the past, so there was definitely an inside story behind this. Two heroes, I thank you for driving away that Fire Lin beast this time, Chao Jinbiao said. He had certainly seen how Dai Xiaohua and Yi Shiwen had scared away the Fire Lin beast, and one of them was only a master of Hotian realm and was simply not strong enough to defeat a Fire Lin beast. Lord is so polite. Dai Xiaohua waved his hands and said as if he did not care. You're welcome, Yi Shiwen said. Chao Jinbiao saw that the two of them had started to talk to each other. He did not stay there for too long, and after talking for a while with other warriors, he finally left. Hey, I can't believe that it really was the Fire Lin beast. Dai Xiaohua chuckled and said after he saw Chao Jinbiao leaving. And there's also that blue flaming flower. Gee, I am afraid it's going to get very lively around here. Dai Xiaohua excitedly said. Didn't I say that blue flaming flower really exists? And the appearance of Fire Lin beast has confirmed my anticipation. I once read a record in a book, and it said that Fire Lin beast was actually associated with the treasure, blue flaming flower. Shortly after the birth of a Fire Lin beast's cub, a blue flaming flower would mature on the place of its birth, and so long as the Fire Lin beast cub swallowed this flower, it would be able to have step-by-step growth from infancy to adulthood. Growing period! Yi Shiwen frowned. An infant Fire Lin beast had been so difficult to deal with, not to mention, it was still in the growth period and no one could guess about the extent of its growth once it reached adulthood. Yi Shiwen felt in his heart that fortunately, it was not in the adulthood right now, otherwise the only option left for them would be either to escape or face massacre at the hands of this unique demon beast that contained the blood of ancient Fire Qilin beast, making it too formidable to deal with. Hey, I'm going to get ready, because it's going to be a lot of fun tomorrow. Dai Xiaohua cupped his hand into the other across his chest and said, Brother Yi, I have things to do, so I will go ahead first. Looking at the departing figure of Dai Xiaohua, Yi Shiwen did not stay in the Chao family manor for too long and returned back to the inn to start practicing. Yi Shiwen always felt that there was something strange here, that things were not as simple as he had previously thought, and it turned that he was right. Even an infant Fire Lin beast was already at the peak of Xiantian first stage, and was powerful enough to make everyone run for their lives, and could even kill some Xiantian second stage masters as well. After the growth period of Fire Lin beast would complete, it would be difficult to describe how formidable it would become in its adulthood. It could be said that this whole matter had become quite scary. However, no matter what, to enhance one's strength, dealing with all the troubles was the way of the king. Night passed in a blink of an eye, and Yi Shiwen had fully concentrated on practicing, but this night had become a sleepless night for many experts, and the reason behind this was the identity of that monster, being revealed as the formidable Fire Lin beast. The existence of Fire Lin beast and blue flaming fire was enough to attract the attention of many experts. After practicing all night, Yi Shiwen finally stopped and went downstairs only to find it crowded with many new warriors, and compared to the warriors he had seen yesterday, this crowd consisted of a lot of stronger experts of Xiantian realm. All of them were covered with dust, and it seemed that they had apparently rushed to the Kyojiaji town after hearing about the Fire Lin Beast and Blue Flaming Flower. NT. Chapter 70 in few hours. But even so, it was nothing, and was he not also the strongest disciple in the younger generation of Qingfeng Mountain's Yiyuan school? This time, no matter what, he must fight and strive on, and during the chaos caused by so many powerful masters, he might have a chance to score a victory. After a while later, a warrior of the Chao family entered the inn and walked straight to the front of Yishiwen and said, "Master Yi, our Chao family's lord has especially sent me to invite you for today's operation of elimination of monster. Are you ready?" And Yishiwen nodded. "Then please come with me." Yishiwen followed the warrior of Chao family out of the inn, and at this time, a buzzing sound of an intense discussion broke out in the inn. "Ah, he was that young man, named Yishiwen, who chased alone after the Fire Lin Beast last night. I never imagined him to be so skinny. Stupid, a warrior must not be judged by his appearance. If strength was decided by the physique of a master, then all of the masters would have iron tower-like physiques. Yes, yesterday I saw an idiot provoking Yishiwen, but instead he got nailed to the wall with a chopstick. Where does this Yishiwen come from? Don't you know?" At this time, a traveling merchant opened his mouth and said, "This Yishiwen is this year's peerless genius from Yiyuan school." "A genius from Yiyuan school? That's not right, although Yuan school is somewhat far from here. But I know of Yifeng, Zhanyang et al., but why have I never heard of Yishiwen before?" a knowledgeable man asked. "You do not know about it?" the traveling merchant said with a smug look on his face. "That Yishiwen is a rising genius of Yiyuan school. He won the inner disciples competition and easily became a champion of Yiyuan school's inner sect. After winning the championship, he again stole the spotlight in the core disciples competition by beheading a Xiantian master. Right now, he is recognized as Yiyuan school's strongest top disciple in the younger generation." Yishiwen did not know that the whole inn had started to talk about his achievements. He followed the Chao family's warrior and soon arrived at the manor of Chao family. At this time, the manor was already crowded with experts, and all of them were exuding a dangerous aura. However, soon, two people caught his attention, and at a corner, an old man was standing under the tree shade, with a cold look on his face, and right then, Yishiwen also noticed his pitch-black iron-like hands. Yishiwen immediately knew that this guy should be Chintai's Ho. Although he seemed to be standing still and alone, but no one was daring to approach him because he seemed more like a beast than a martial artist. On the other side, there was an entirely different scene. A youth clad in red robe, holding a sword in his hand, was standing with a smile on his face while surrounded by a multitude of warriors, trying to get close to him. After all, although the influence of Shaoyang's sect was not comparable to Yiyuan school, Dai family, and other great sects, but it was still not a small power because 3 Xiantian masters had assumed personal command over the Shaoyang sect, and it had definitely a powerful influence in this neighborhood that couldn't be ignored. Yishiwen also found that the strength level of these warriors was obviously more than the warriors of Qifeng Mountain area and was really closer to the warriors found in the central regions of Great Yu State. "Brother Yi!" At this time, the voice of Dai Xiaohua entered Yi Zaiwen's ears. He turned to look and actually saw Dai Xiaohua running towards him. "I never thought that Brother Yi was actually a brilliant student of Yiyuan school. You tried to conceal this from me and I feel bitter about it. When did you become so bashful? You and I became good friends without worrying about our background identity and status," Yishiwen said with a smile. "Ha ha ha, exactly, you said well, looked pleasing to the eyes of each other, then you and I became good friends, without worrying about our background identity and status." Dai Xiaohua laughed, and said, "Gentlemen, NT, Chapter 71 will come as a regular release tomorrow. Good night, guys." Laughing face. Chapter 71. Chapter 71. To hit with hands or fists. Gentlemen. At this time, the lord of Chao family, Chao Jinbiao, came out and cupped one hand and the other across his chest and said, "Today, you all have accepted our invitation, and it is great honor for our small town. Lord Chao, don't mention it, because today we have come for the matter related to the Fire Lin beast," a warrior said. Everyone nodded, though this was an operation initiated by the Chao family. But if there were no Fire Lin beast and blue flaming flower in the picture, then who would have come at Chao family's invitation? Good, this monster extermination operation will now officially begin. Everyone please follow us. Chao Jinbei did not speak much and immediately began the operation. Led by the members of Chao family, the large team of mighty warriors headed towards the place where the underground magma pool was located. Yi Shiwen and Dai Xiaohua were also present in the crowd, and they soon went out of the town. All of these warriors were fast, and within half an hour, they arrived under a hillside. This hillside was not high, only about 56 meters, but there was a big hole on its top and one could see a very dark bottomless place from above. The magma pool was present beneath it. Yi Shiwen quickly followed the crowd into the cave. After entering the cave, they suddenly felt a heat wave blowing and could even hear the sound of lava rolling and boiling inside cave, accompanied with the bubbling sound. Yi Shiwen reckoned that maybe this magma pool had not formed by an active volcano, but it was hard to say. After all, this could only be calculated based on thousands of years of volcanic action. But now, it seemed to have been formed from a volcano, and that must have happened a very long time ago. When the team went deeper into the cave, the temperature of the ground started to increase gradually, and some of the warriors had to wrap their feet with jinqi, otherwise the heat would have burnt their feet. It was getting darker inside the cave, but everyone here was an expert and could clearly see in just a little bit of light. Moreover, as they were approaching the magma pool, the cave had gradually started to illuminate with red light. The team continued to walk in the direction from where the red light was coming, and only after a while they saw a huge magma pool, filled with rolling and bubbling red-hot magma. Everyone clearly saw that right at the center of the magma pool, there was a single blue flaming lotus, and seemed to be camouflaged with its color similar to the color of the surrounding magma. People could not help but be secretly amazed. They never expected to actually see a flower growing in the magma, and it could survive under such a high temperature. That was definitely not ordinary. They saw the entirely crimson-colored blue flaming lotus, and they also clearly saw that it contained lotus seeds as well. Haha, it's actually the blue flaming lotus! A warrior laughed and said. After seeing the flower, the warrior picked up a huge rock and suddenly threw it into the magma pool. Splash! The rock fell into the magma, and that warrior immediately jumped and stepped on that huge rock, and without waiting even for an instant, he suddenly leaped again towards the blue flaming lotus to plunder it. Everyone saw that once that warrior tried to grasp the blue flaming lotus in his hand, he started screaming over and over while his hands had instantly burned to a terrifying extent. His body fiddled, and as there nothing to support his falling body, he fell directly into the magma and screamed pitifully before completely melting. He really was courting death. Many of the warriors who had fortunately not rushed like him, said with a look of disdain on their faces. Yi Shiwen frowned at this troublesome situation. The blue flaming lotus was completed, surrounded by red-hot magma, and there were no places to step over to approach it, and looking at the scary level of temperature of the magma, even a foot, properly wrapped in reinforced jinqi, would instantly melt and disappear once stepped into the magma, which was absolutely terrifying. Let me try. At this time, the young master of Shaoyang sect, Wu Shaoyang, shouted loudly and instantly threw a red double-edged sword which flew out skimming over the magma pool, and Wu Shaoyang immediately flew up, and as lithe as the swallow, he descended over his sword and rushed towards the blue flaming lotus to snatch it. "Nt, as lithe as a swallow is an idiom. Schwa!" The treasured sword passed swiftly over the blue flaming lotus and instantly cut down the entire flower while flying vigorously through the air. But at this time, when he stretched out his hands to firmly hold the blue flaming lotus, it started to emit buzzing sound after coming in contact with his hands. The ultra-high temperature had started to melt his jinqi, though fortunately, He was already a master of the Xiantian realm, and his Xiantian Jinqi was far more powerful than the Hotian Jinqi. If a Hotian realm warrior had held this lotus in his hand, then it would have instantly corroded his Jinqi and burnt his hand. Wu Xiaoyang soon flew skimming over the magma pool to the other side, when at this time he heard a shrill piercing sound and saw a huge rock flying towards him at a lightning speed. Bang! Wu Xiaoyang struggled to twist his body in the midair and dodged the rock, which then heavily crashed into the side of the cliff and dug a big hole into it. "Qintais Ho, you old bastard, how dare you sneak an attack on me?" Wu Xiaoyang turned around to look and noticed that it was Qintais Ho who had played this dirty trick on him. Qintais Ho sneered, "You better put down the blue flaming lotus. It is not the kind of thing that your Xiaoyang sect should meddle with." Wu Xiaoyang's complexion got unsightly and he stared fiercely at the Qintais Ho and said, "If I say no, then? Then your father will lose a son, so I advise you to be little sensible. Years ago, I made a living by traveling around the country when you were just born." Qintais Ho bluntly said, "Old fool, you want to take advantage of your own seniority. So what if you have practiced for decades? Just you wait and see how I cut you today." Wu Xiaoyang had become enraged by Qintais Ho's words. "You can try." Qintais Ho sneered and rushed towards Wu Xiaoyang. "Old stuff, just drop dead already." Wu Xiaoyang struck his sword and a terrifying jianqi instantly rushed out towards Qintais Ho. "NT, Tais Ho means iron hand." Boom! Qintais Ho used his hands to directly block and scatter the incoming jianqi, but at this time, his figure stagnated and it seemed as if he would fall into the magma. He immediately shot his palm, releasing a terrifying qijin towards the magma. With the help of the opposite reaction force of this attack, his body suddenly bounced back to go up, and like an eagle, he instantly rushed towards Wu Xiaoyang. "NT, qijin means powerful qi." Even if they had actually come for blue flaming lotus. But this hitting with hands or fists began too quickly, and even the shadow of the fire Lin beast is nowhere to be seen. Dai Xiaohua said with disdain. "NT, to hit with hands or fists means to fight over something." NT, Chapter 72 will come as a regular release tomorrow. Check donate page for the new release schedule for MGS.